Good morning, everyone. Are we on? Yes, I guess we're okay. My name is Jeff Kelly. I'm the National Field Trainer for a technology called MutualLink. I want to welcome you all here to Seminole State College and thank you for your attending today. You know, just a little over 12 hours ago, there were a bunch of munchkins here on the stage enjoying their graduation ceremony. I think it's our duty to make sure that as they progress through the years of education that we protect them as best we can. I don't like my job with MutualLink and helping with school security. I love my job. It's a passion of mine. The kids should be safe when they go to school. It's horrific what's happening around the country today. And it's a credit for all you folks for coming here today. There are MutualLink people in the group. Dr. Wengrovitz is here. Mike, would you stand up? He's our Vice President of Innovation. We're working on some dynamic technology to even allow your radios to work in a building where they haven't worked before. So you're going to see a demonstration live today of the panic button solution, which has proven to reduce the time to resolution by as much as half. I'm not going to be very long-winded with this, but I can't thank Seminole College enough. Maxine Oliver, head of security here at the university, the college where we're deployed. The staff here has been nothing short of remarkable, and it's a pleasure to be here. With that, if I could ask you all to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now, with that in mind, the students that passed away last Friday, and certainly Parkland, and all our brothers and sisters in law enforcement, could I ask you all just for a moment of silence in their memory? Thank you all very much. It is my distinct honor right now to introduce a man that I've been working with for years. He's on the MutualLink Board of Advisors. He has a long, storied career in law enforcement, which I'm sure he'll share with you. He's got more anecdotal stories than any other person I think I've met, because he's been there and he's done that. So with that, I'd like to introduce Mr. Ron Brooks.
Thanks, Jeff, and thanks to all of you for taking time from your busy schedules. I know you got a lot to do, but we're here to talk about a really important topic. I'm going to be your cruise director for the day. This is really your conference. We want you to be engaged, to ask questions, to challenge, to share your best practices. We've got a group of experts here, but each of you in the room is an expert, and we need your opinions too. I'll give you just a little background on myself so you kind of understand where I'm coming from. I spent 38 years in law enforcement in California. I was retired as an assistant chief with California Department of Justice. That would be like FDLE here. And then I was under a joint command, the director of both the high-intensity drug trafficking area and the Fusion Center for Northern California. We had an area of about 10,000 square miles, 10 million population, one of the largest fusion centers in the country with a staff of over 100. But what got me involved in this is not just my role as a practitioner, but I chaired for the Department of Justice and DHS, a federal advisory committee called the Criminal Intelligence Coordinating Council. That was the body that wrote pretty much all of the guidance on how we learn to share information, to talk about threats, to analyze. We wrote the National Criminal Intelligence Sharing Plan, the Fusion Center Guidelines, the White House Information Sharing Plan. I also chaired for the Director of National Intelligence, his Homeland Security and Law Enforcement Advisory Board, one of only 2 external advisory boards to the intelligence community. And I was the state and local rep to the White House National Security Council and the Interagency Policy Committee for Information Sharing and Access. So I've done this as a cop, as a practitioner. I've been in your shoes. But I've also had a chance to view this from a public policy side and a political side. You know, we're here today to talk about what is probably one of the most vexing problems facing America, and that's school violence. But we really can't separate school violence from community violence. I mean, when we talk about keeping our kids safe, and that's really our primary goal as police officers, keep our community safe, especially our country's most precious commodity, our children. They're our future. That's what we're all dedicated to. I'm sure that's what all of you, whether you're here as a sworn law enforcement officer or a civilian supporting law enforcement or supporting campus security, or from a school district or a particular school board, that's what we're all here for. We want to make sure that those kids are safe all the time. The problem is they're not safe at school, they're not safe at McDonald's, they're not safe driving down the highway, they're not safe at a sporting event or a movie theater. We've seen those shootings time and again. Look, this is a complex issue. I mean, you see it played out in the legislature, in the halls of Congress. I was just at an excellent school safety summit that Senator Rubio had in Washington, D.C. There's a lot of discussion about guns, a lot of discussion about the degradation of family, a lot of discussion about violent video games. But the reality is, we've got to save kids today. Those discussions have been going on for years and years and years. And at the same time, we continue to lose our fellow citizens, teachers, staff, and kids. Incredibly, in the first 20 weeks of this year, we've had 20 school shootings. Parkland and Santa Fe were the largest, but each of these school shootings impact our communities, shake children to their core, cause probably a lifetime of post-traumatic stress for them and their families. We have 5 times more school violence in America than in any other industrialized nation in the world. It's unbelievable to me. And we have lost more people in school violence this year, 2018, than we've lost in the United States military, both overseas and in training accidents back home. That's really unbelievable. Look, we need to discuss the fixes, and not the political fixes, not the public policy fixes, but the real fixes. You know, and there's a lot of discussion on school hardening, better ways that we can make our campuses safe, putting SROs or other armed staff to guard our kids. All of that is important. But when you think about school hardening, just look at the Santa Fe shooting. You pull the fire alarm and kids run out, and they're at risk. You wait until recess, lunch, before or after school, they're at risk. If you look at the airport shooting here in Florida, you know, that shooter couldn't get beyond security, so he took a gun out of a packed bag at the baggage claim area where there is no security, and then people were at risk. We need to find a better way to communicate regionally. And when I say regionally, it's important because if there was a shooting today at Seminole State, think of all of the agencies from the region that are going to respond. It won't just be the college police here and Seminole County sheriffs, but jurisdictions, other police and sheriff's jurisdictions, FDLE and FHP, maybe even Fish and Wildlife. You're going to bring a lot of police officers, and then you compound that by bringing fire resources, EMS resources, coordinating with hospitals so you can set up triage, make sure that the right patients get to the right hospitals and that you can track that. These are complex problems, but they're actually not as complex as they really seem. As long as these tragedies continue to happen, and I think they're going to happen for a long time, unfortunately, we need to think about how we save lives. I mean, the discussion on how we prevent this, how we make sure another school shooting never happens, that's really valid, and we should continue that. There's no excuse not to. But in the meantime, because we've struggled with this for many, many years. 1999 was when Columbine woke us up to this. We've struggled with this for a long time. In the meantime, we got to find a way to minimize loss of life and serious injury, and that means getting resources on scene quickly. That means being able to coordinate with the school, with the other responding officers, with fire, with EMS, with the hospitals. We need to get cops on target so they can stop the violence, so they can arrest or otherwise neutralize that shooter or shooters. We need to figure out where we can safely set up our command, where we can safely set up triage, how we can get people in and out. A good buddy of mine, Dan Oates, is the police chief of Miami Beach now, was the chief in Aurora, Colorado, when they managed that horrific shooting there at the theaters. He said the biggest problem was we couldn't talk to fire and EMS, and we couldn't tell them what areas were safe and what areas weren't. And so fire and EMS wouldn't come in. The people that went to the hospital went via police car. They started loading patients up in police vehicles because they couldn't coordinate. But had they used Mutual Link or a system like it, they could have coordinated that. They could have reduced the loss of life. They could have improved the health of those patients, and they could have done it more quickly. Jeff mentioned bringing things to resolution more quickly, and we know that's the key. You know that when you get officers on scene, coordinated, with everybody being on the same sheet of music, understanding what's going on, and can address a threat, whether you're responding to a robbery or a burglary or a fire or a school shooting, that is going to help you address that more rapidly. And we know that the real-time situational awareness that comes from being able to hit an alarm, set up a link, share radio communications between the schools, the law enforcement officers, fire, EMS, the hospitals. We know that when you do that, you're saving lives. You know, I am, as a 38-year cop, and really now, for the last 6 years, I have a public policy business in Washington, D.C., so I've been doing this a long time. I've been thinking about these things for a long time. But I really think about them probably just like each of you, not as a cop so much, but as a dad and now a grandfather. These things scare me every day. You worry about sending your kids to school. You worry about sending your grandchildren to school, or your nieces or your nephews. As cops, we kind of think we're impervious, but we know that the people we love are not impervious. Like I said, I think we all kind of coalesced around this issue April 20th of 1999, when 13 people were killed in the Columbine massacre, shot by 2 shooters. I had 3 buddies that were on those teams that went in, and we all watched it play out on the news. Multiple agencies responding to that area, unable to coordinate, difficulty in forming up active shooter teams. We've done a better job at that since. But coordination would have been the key to stopping the loss of life there. Tragedy hit home again. April 16th of 2007, we learned that 32 people were killed and countless others at Virginia Tech. I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's a beautiful campus with great history, a great legacy. Those kids should have been safe there, felt safe there every day, and they weren't. Interestingly, one of the women that works at my firm now, that works for me, was a Virginia Tech survivor. And that haunts her every day, just as you would expect it to. And on December 14th, the unthinkable at Sandy Hook, 20 children, 6 and 7 years old. No 6 or 7-year-old should die at school, and 6 adults trying to protect those kids by one deranged gunman. And we've talked to the folks at Sandy Hook, if they could have coordinated better, a small town, and then the state police, if they could have coordinated better, and if they could have coordinated the emergency response better. And then this year, on Valentine's Day at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, unbelievable. And I've had a chance to meet with a number of the Parkland parents. Just tragic. But here's the real tragedy. Since then, 10 more school shootings and 18 more deaths just since Parkland. And it's been on it's been the top topic of discussion in Washington, here in Tallahassee, in Austin, you name the state capital, top topic of discussion. And yet we continue to have those deaths. And I talked to a number of first responders to Parkland and some of the Parkland parents, and they were all frustrated at their inability to coordinate radio communications, the sharing of video, the review of data. That was a big problem for them, and some of you may have been in that response team. You know, we kind of think of this as a recent phenomenon, but interestingly, the first school shooting was in 1764. We've had 472 school shootings, probably more, because history didn't record everything since that time, and at least 587 deaths. I make that point because, not to take away from the shootings that we have experienced recently, but to make us all think that this is an ongoing phenomenon. It is an ongoing national tragedy, and so we can't just wait for that silver political bullet that will end all this. We have to be prepared today. We can't wait till tomorrow. We know that within a week we'll probably have another school shooting. We can't wait. We have to be prepared. And we continue to see mass violence around the country. Here's the deal. When you're able to connect this school with their school police department and maybe Seminole County Sheriff's, and then you connect another school and their police department and their sheriff's office and their fire department and their EMS, and now they're all connected. I was lucky enough to have been a client of Mutual Links. When I was still in government, I brought them to the San Francisco Bay Area to use not only for these tragic incidents, but to use as we coordinated our security efforts for, you know, major league sports, big parades, Fleet Week, you know, you name the event, all the way through Super Bowl 50 in Santa Clara. It works great. When you connect for one incident, you're all connected. You have the ability, whether it's a shooting at a local McDonald's, an officer-involved shooting where you've got an officer down and you're trying to coordinate multiple agencies responding in to help, a big fire, a tragedy like we had at San Francisco Airport, Asiana Airlines went down. We were able to coordinate hospital, EMS, fire, law enforcement. We know we need to do that not just because of the school shootings, but look what happens in our country. Look at the attack in San Bernardino. Look at the attack in Las Vegas. Look at the attack at Pulse. We know that we're only one crazed or several crazed people away from that kind of violence every single day. You know, the great thing about, and I don't want to make this an advertisement, an infomercial for Mutual Link, although they're our sponsors. But the thing that I was so impressed with was this was just mutual aid radio sharing. But it was mutual aid radio sharing on steroids. So we could talk to our critical infrastructure providers, police departments, fire, EMS, emergency management. We could share documents and annotate those documents. Think about sending a schematic of this school. You all saw how tough it was to find this place, or at least I did. Think about sending that and being able to annotate exactly where this is and share that. Share video, share photos of suspects. What about an active shooter where you ask the people to back their security camera video up so you can look and see maybe who the shooter was and if they came in with partners, with Confederates, how they got in, what they were wearing, where they went. And we did that in the San Francisco Bay Area, which you might have read is politically crazy. Everything you've read, if you just triple that, it's true. It's politically crazy. And we did that without a single MOU. It was just mutual aid to us. We didn't have a single MOU. We didn't have a single city or county council, city manager, city council, county board, state legislator said that we needed MOUs or contracts. We just did it, and it worked. Look, we've brought together some great experts, but like I said, you guys are the experts too, you guys and gals. You're here with stories. So I'm not going to belabor this. I'm around all day. I'm happy to talk about my experiences deploying Mutual Link, and it was easy to deploy. And I'll tell you, this is one quick story. They set this stuff, and they said, hey, this stuff is kind of plug and play, but we'll send an engineer to set it up on our first maybe 10 or 15 deployments. And I said, well, if it's really plug and play, just send it. And we had it all set up, like at least 10 sites in one day without having to call their support team once. I mean, that's simply how easy it is. And one time, we had visitors from Brazil, and they wanted to see it, and I couldn't find anybody to use it, and I can't even dial my iPhone, and I was able to do a demo with MutualLink. And that's how easy it is. And the couple of guys here that know me, like Jeff Kelly and Joe Maz, know that I can't hardly dial a cell phone, and I made it that easy. So this is your conference. I'm excited to have our speakers here. I'm excited that you're here. I'm around all day, happy to answer questions. I want to introduce our first, if I can find my notes, our first speaker, who is a great guy. I had a chance to meet him at a program we did at the University of Central Florida a couple of years ago. Chief David Perry is the Chief of Police of the Florida State University Police Department. Go FSU, right? The chief started his law enforcement career in 1993 in Albany, Georgia. After graduating from college there, playing as a quarterback and a tight end, and then blowing out his knee, I learned today, and becoming a recruiter for them. He was quickly put onto a drug task force where he worked with DEA and GBI and local law enforcement. That was a love of his, but at 26 years old, I was still trying to find the way to the restroom, chief, at 26. At 26 years old, he became the police chief at Albany State University, and then went on to become the deputy chief at Clemson, and then was recruited to Florida State. A fairly complex environment because it has 6 satellite campuses and a K-12 school and a big university right there in Tallahassee. In addition to serving all that he does there, he's very active in organizations around law enforcement and campus law enforcement. He's a past chapter president of the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives. He's the incoming president of the Florida State Chiefs Association. Long legacy of bringing IACP guys from that organization. We'll work on your campaign later. He's a graduate of Albany State University with a Bachelor of Science or a Bachelor of Arts degree in Criminal Justice and a Master in Public Administration. My great honor to introduce Chief David Perry.
Good morning, everyone. Come on, y'all pick it up a little bit. This is hopefully going to be an informative session. Some of you may have seen the presentation before, but I hope it will be informative. I hope it will give you some lessons learned from a critical incident that Florida State University was able to survive. And we were only able to survive it, in my opinion, is because of the training and the support that I received from the administration to prepare us for this tragedy. So I'm just going to get into it. If you have questions, I've been told to stay right on time. I'm looking around at my handlers. They say stay on time so we can keep the agenda moving. So I do want to just briefly I'll mention my bio as we go forward just for a moment. I'll tell you about the FSU Police Department and how we're comprised so you can maybe compare it to your agency and the resources that you have. I'll tell you how training and preparation really made the difference in our critical incident. I'll tell you the serious business of hiring the best. So many of us are tasked with hiring the very best and finding that right recruit for our agency. And so you can't settle. I hope my presentation will remind you that settling is not good because any one of our men and women can be called to be that frontline responder in the moment of crisis. I'll tell you how we learned from the past, how we learned from a critical incident in that very library a few years before, and how that changed the complete outcome of our active shooter event. I'll tell you about November 20th, that day, and I'll tell you some of the lessons learned, and then I'll take a few questions from you as we go forward. As Jeff mentioned and as Ron said, we have some heroes who have made ultimate sacrifices for us, and so I always start off by kind of remembering our heroes, and unfortunately we've lost 55 officers this year who they've given their lives in the service of protecting our community. So if we could just have one more just brief moment of silence for the families and those officers who've given the ultimate sacrifice. Thank you very much. And so just so you understand the little small school in Tallahassee, Florida State University, I just wanted to give you some statistics about us and how we are built. We currently have 75 sworn officers. We have a 24-hour dispatch center. And then I have security officers that help patrol our garages and some of our large facilities on our campus. You see, we're built just like almost any other typical law enforcement agency with a command staff of a deputy chief, operations, support services, and then many other components. I think some unique components for higher education is that we most often encompass emergency management. So the emergency manager for the university reports to me. I just hired a new emergency manager, so excited, a gentleman by the name of Curtis Summerhoff from down south near Miami. He's starting with us. And I also have a responsibility for all the card access and CCTV systems. That's really a benefit to our agency because we can control all of our doors. We have control over all access cameras, systems, and the card access systems. And that will come into play in my presentation as we go forward. And maybe if you have a college student on a college campus, I also have responsibility for the most important component on a college or university campus, and that's parking and transportation, right? Where do you park your car? How do we get around on campus? And so that really keeps me busy, but it is a very big organization. I also have a satellite campus in Panama City, Florida. I have a campus in Sarasota, and maybe connected to many of you in this room. I also have responsibility for the Florida State University High School, K through 12, where my daughter was dropped off this morning in the 8th grade, where she's been ever since pre-K. We have 1,700 students there. I have one SRO, and we're adding a second SRO before the beginning of next year. So I'm in the same seat that you're in as it relates to K through 12 security. So how do we train our employees and students? I just want you to kind of have a little background on the opportunities that we have to remind our employees and students about safety. And so we train them on run, hide, fight. We have student orientation, we have programs and services throughout the year, and I've had to dedicate many of my command staff officers and my crime prevention team to go out and provide these presentations so all of our campus community can have an understanding about their expectation and our expectation of them in the event of an active shooter. And so we work tirelessly throughout the year. We're right now scheduling about 15 presentations in the next month and a half, if not less. So we're really busy, and of course these tragedies continue to add to our plate of requests for training. How we're equipped and trained, I think it's important for you to know that we have a mandatory fitness policy in our police department. We have workout time and training time for our staff, but we really train, and we don't just, check the box and go to the range. We have all the life-saving tools. We have the support from our administration, which is maybe not common to have these type of weapons in every vehicle. We practice on raids and search warrants. We execute a high number of search warrants on and off campus for drugs and other events. And as you can see, the physical standard is very intense. We do a monthly statistic and tabulation, and so we average 490 hours of training for each officer every 4 years. So you can see the investment that we make in trying to make sure that our officers are trained. So I'm trying to emphasize to you that the better trained and the more repetitions that men and women have for that job, the better that they will perform. We've had warning after warning. You've heard Ron, you've heard Jeff, you've heard others say some of the history. So we've had these warnings. I do these presentations for people who are not like us and don't carry guns and are not, sensitive to some of the tragedies that we've learned from. But we've had these warnings, and they continue to happen, starting from the Texas sniper to how we changed in Columbine, how we dealt with the tragedy in Sandy Hook, and how we were even connected to the tragedy at Virginia Tech that I'll explain to you. The numbers continue to increase, and I just updated my presentation last night just to really illustrate school shootings are a reality, and unfortunately we're averaging one a week. So the thought that it can't happen here or it won't impact us should no longer be a normal discussion. So when responding to an active shooter call, I know this is probably a good reminder for you, but every second counts, every second, and I'll prove it to you in a few minutes in my presentation. But one example took place not far from here on March 18, 2013, when a good friend of mine and his staff had to respond to a critical incident call at the University of Central Florida. Again, responding promptly, responding lights and siren, getting there as fast as possible and providing those life-saving services can make all the difference. That's Richard Berry. Some of you know him very well. He's about to retire soon, but he's holding up a machine gun that had the intent on taking several lives within a residence hall at the University of Central Florida. It was only because some of you know that the magazine was loaded with too many rounds, the gun jammed, and then the shooter had to fall back on a secondary plan that wasn't really well thought out. It was because Richard's officers received that call and responded so quickly that it put that shooter in a bind. He went into a room within his residence hall and ultimately took his life. But Richard and I both, we attribute that situation resolving that way because of the quick response of his officers. He said, I think the rapid response of law enforcement may have changed his ability to think quickly on his feet. And so we've seen that time and time again. And I'll continue to reemphasize that time matters, every second counts. We know some of the statistics as it relates to responses to schools, and the school response to the most recent shooting was very, very good, but that's still a long time, and people need to be well-trained and prepared to respond to that type of situation. I just want you to know about alerts, because notifications matter. You're going to hear about a panic button and a tool here today. Florida State University uses an emergency alert notification tool. And when you have lots of time to deal with weather systems and something developing in the Gulf right now, we can talk about it, we can have meetings, we can have donuts and coffee and prepare for those weather systems. But when it's a no-notice event, you really have to have a tool or some kind of mechanism to notify people in that community, instantly or within a reasonable amount of time. And so at Florida State University, we have more than 39 notification methods. We don't hang our hat on just one or all 39, but we believe redundancy and trying to reach our community wherever they are is very important. In classrooms, outside of classrooms, in buildings that have good cell coverage, and in some buildings that don't. So we don't rely on just one. And when we created the system, I wanted to just go down to Staples and buy that easy button, right? And just hit that easy button and say that was easy, and we could use that technology, but we needed more technology than that. So we implemented a system through one of our integrators called Siemens. And so that's the box that's within our emergency communications center. That's in dispatch. And so that box allows our dispatchers to immediately press one of 4 or 5 buttons to launch our emergency notification platform if needed. And so we've taken away a long login process. We've taken away some of the delays in sending an emergency message when we need to. And that did help us tremendously on November 20th when we had our shooting. So here's how our emergency notification system works. I know many of you have some, but if you don't, we try to streamline our activation process. So these are the 5 situations that we would initiate an emergency alert call, basically, for our campus. Severe thunderstorm warnings, tornado warnings, and flash flood. You see that there's a National Weather Service logo next to each of those. So I don't work for the National Weather Service. I didn't go to school to be a meteorologist, but I do believe and trust that if the National Weather Service says that there's a severe thunderstorm or weather that's going to impact your immediate campus area, and we've defined our campus by a certain grid, if they tell us that any one of those 3 weather systems are going to impact our campus, we don't hesitate. We press the button because now we have, concern for safety for our campus community that's either indoors or out during one of those 3 weather systems. Now the 4th, you see, is a dangerous situation. That one is exclusively for law enforcement related situations. That means it could be an active shooter, it could be a car that had exploded in a garage, it could be a carjacking that unfortunately has terminated on our campus. It could have been a number of situations, and all that I mentioned have happened at FSU since I've been there, including a plane crash about 2 blocks away from the university. So any one of these dangerous situations that could occur, the police department would activate that system, and we would notify the campus community that is a dangerous situation. And then we have a couple of others. Hazardous condition that could be caused by something in the community from the Leon County Emergency Management area, Health Department, Homeland Security, or any other anomaly that we did not list. So we don't have to go find someone, we don't have to wake the president up, they don't have to call me and say, Chief, can we launch the system? All of the staff, all the administration, we're in complete agreement that if any one of these scenarios happen, we will press our emergency notification button. And it's helped us tremendously because we've gone from using this type of login system. Some of you are in this situation, or colleagues or other universities who have to log in to each of their systems in order to launch their notification methods. So before my easy button, Mike, I would have to log in to each of these pages to create our emergency message. The main web page, we'd have to log in for our outdoor sirens, we'd have to log in to send a text and email, and you have to get all that right the first time. And I'm sure that there's some nervousness, I'm sure that there's some anxiety when you're trying to launch a message, and so that's just the primary systems. We also have secondary methods of voicemail messages, RSS feeds, Facebook, Twitter. And so total, before the easy button, it would take 62 minutes to log in to send an emergency message. So is that reasonable? You think 62 minutes to send an emergency message? Heck no, we would get crucified by the media and others for taking that long. So now we send a message within 4 to 5 minutes, if not less, by pressing one button and it starts to generate. Another important component is that our system is an opt-out system, opt-out. That means that we force registration for our employees and our students. I met with the president many years ago and told him about the opt-out, opt-in decision, and if we depend on people to opt in, our registration rates will only be between 18 and 23%. And if we really want people to register, to have our messages and know when there's an emergency, we have to force registration. So that means we make them be in our system and we allow them to opt out. That means our registration rate is as high as 83%. For our students, before they can register for a class, they have to navigate through some screens, but they're brought to a screen that says, can we have your cell phone number for emergency purposes only? We asked them for that, and the lawyers told me I had to create a box to allow them to say, no, I don't want to provide it. I really wanted that language to say, hey, I don't care if I die, leave me alone, but they wouldn't put that language there, so we have to put good legal language there. So we do give them an option to give us the number or to opt out, and as I said, our registration rate is very, very high, 83%. I got to tell you about our Consolidated Dispatch Center because it played a very focal point in our active shooter event. Interoperability, communications, that's why we're here today. It was the centerpiece of how our incident was unfolding, how we did get help on scene, but it also created some challenges for us, and I'll tell you a few of those lessons learned. Our Consolidated Dispatch Center was new. It was within its second year of being implemented within Leon County. And just like the new iPhone 8 update, some of you are scared to update your phones right now because you're like, let's work through the bugs, let's hear what's going on. And so the CDA also had some bugs and challenges, and some of you have heard of some of those challenges that unfortunately has resulted in officer safety issues and one officer being tragically killed because he responded to a call without knowing that there was a premise hazard there. So I'll tell you about the lessons learned from that as we go forward. You have to learn from every incident that occurs. I read many after-action reports, but there's nothing like learning from your own tragedies and situations that happen in your own backyard. And so 6 years before our active shooter event, in the very same library, one of our employees was on the 6th floor cataloging books, kind of isolated, when a residentially challenged homeless person sexually assaulted her in that library. She was brave, she came forward, she reported it, and we put every resource available on the table. We worked with the Leon County Sheriff's Office and we found that perpetrator, arrested him, and he's serving life in prison. But it showed us how vulnerable we were within our library. It showed us that we could allow people just to walk in with no accountability and no screening. And so I worked with the library, I worked with the provost, and we cut through the red tape, and we implemented security officers within that library, but most importantly, we implemented a turnstile system to where every person who enters the library has to use a swipe card in order to enter the library and to exit. If you're not affiliated with the university, we will issue a temporary ID, but there is a registration process where we will collect personal data, a driver's license, and now we had much better accountability for people entering and exiting the library. I'll prove to you in just a few slides that one crime prevention by environmental design tool, that new addition, changed how our shooting unfolded. It saved many lives by implementing that one piece. I want to tell you about staffing, because most civilians think that agencies have enough staff working around the clock and that we'll have enough people to respond to a critical incident. But on the night of our shooting, the staff that you see on the screen is what I had working for a campus community of about 7,000 students who live on campus. And I failed to tell you that it's about 42,000 students at Florida State University with 13,000 employees. So on that night, I had a shift supervisor and I had 4 police officers. I had 2 dispatchers and 3 security officers working. So that was the bulk, that was everyone that was working that night to provide life safety services. I had a corporal that could have been on shift, but it just happened to be their day off. I also had an officer on sick leave. I had 1 officer that was there off day on their rotation, and I had 1 dispatcher that was off. Ever since Virginia Tech, I said I put in a mandatory policy that we have at least 2 dispatchers working at all times within our agency. During the Virginia Tech tragedy, there was only one dispatcher working, and there was just no way that that one poor employee could keep up with the calls for service and dispatch for law enforcement officers. So that's a mandate for us. On most nights, we have at least 3 that are working because of the call volume. I got to illustrate to you how important it is to hire the very best. And so these are the men and women who responded to the shooting that night. Officer Parise Adams and Officer O.J. Sloan were both very new employees. Officer Adams had never been in law enforcement before. This was his first law enforcement position with Florida State University Police Department, put himself through the police academy, and at the same time he was being hired, we also hired O.J. Sloan, who had come from a sheriff's department. Different type of policing. He had some experience, but not working in a campus setting. So those were 2 of the employees. 2 additional employees that were working and responded that night were Oma Nations and Daniel Cutchins. Oma Nations had just recently graduated from Florida State University. I'll never forget, he came and met with me months before the hiring process and said, "Hey, Chief, I really want to work for this agency, and if I don't get the job, I'm just going to go down south and work with my dad's law firm, but I really want to work for the police department." Put himself through the academy, and we hired him. Daniel Cutchins worked for the Capitol Police. Some of you passed by him many times when you were in the Capitol, but his dad also works at the FSU Police Department, and his dad has been there for 28 years. So those were the 4 officers that were working that evening. And these were the 2 dispatchers. One dispatcher had some experience with us since 2009, had done a fantastic job for us, and I'm still always I get goosebumps when I talk about Camilla Peralta, the second dispatcher on the screen, because she had only been with us about 4 months, April, May, June, July, about 4 to 5 months before the shooting took place. But when I looked at her application, when we were going through the recruiting process, I saw that she had some very, very important skills, and she had worked at another agency. And I'll tell you about that in just a minute, but you got to find the best talent for your agency. And then here's my quarterback. This was my shift supervisor. Many of us, when we go to bed at night, we leave the shift to a sergeant or a lieutenant. Well, this was my Drew Brees, my Peyton Manning. This is my Cam Newton that was running the ship that night. And Sergeant Wiley had been with us for a number of years. He also served in the Navy. So he had lots of experience, and you'll hear his voice in just a couple of minutes and hear how well thought out his plans were in responding to this very critical incident that was a no-notice event. So the summary again, my police communications officers had some experience, but one was brand new. But Camilla Peralta, that second dispatcher, when I looked over her application, I saw that she had transitioned from Texas, and she literally was one of the dispatchers working during the Fort Hood shooting that occurred there. And I was like, wow, man, I want to have her skill in our agency, because who knows, if we ever have an active shooter or a critical event, I would want her to be dispatching for us. And lo and behold, she was working for our agency during that night. Also told you I had 2 officers that had no previous law enforcement experience. That means that they didn't have the comfort of relying on 20 years of experience and going through multiple training sessions. They had to rely on the training that we instilled in them and what our expectations were for their response to a critical incident. 2 of the other officers had 11 years combined experience, and our supervisor, that senior person, had 22 years of combined law enforcement experience, 15 with the University Police Department and 7 as a deputy sheriff. So on November 20th, I'm trying to set the day for you. It was a busy day. It was a time before final exams were about to begin. And so it dawned on the students that, hey, I need to go to the library and study if exams are coming up. So our library was packed, had more than 600 people in the library. It's a 24-hour facility. We knew the Thanksgiving Day holiday was right upon us, so it was an anxious time, but it was a good time. We're trying to get the students to finish up their classwork and get ready to go home and see their parents and family for the holiday. The Strozier Library is a very large facility. It has more than 6 floors, has 6 floors and a basement level. It's open to the public 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and some of the students call it Club Strozier. It's so popular. It has a Starbucks cafeteria, Starbucks coffee shop in the library. And look up this fact, it's one of the most highest grossing Starbucks in the country because it has 2 sides. It has a double-sided counter. So it's the only Starbucks in the country that has 2 sides where they serve people. So they make a lot of money there. I want to tell you about the training and preparation. You may call it good luck, but we call it preparation for us because we had active shooter training exactly 14 days before the shooting on November 20th, exactly 14 days. The squad that was going before the training was Squad C, and the notice that went out to the department was that all sworn officers would participate. And for the first time ever, we tried something new. We invited our dispatchers to actually go out to our training site at the Highway Patrol Academy, put them in a room, and make them actually set up the center like they were dispatched during normal calls. So they were the ones calling the shots. They were the ones having to keep up with the officers, where they were, how they were being deployed. So that was one important component that we added. The second was that we said everyone who participates in the training this year, you'll have to dress like you normally would dress. You won't be able to wear your 5'11" pants if that's not what you wear on a regular basis. You have to be prepared just as if you were going to respond to a critical incident call for service, just like you were on duty. And so we're trying to make it as realistic as possible, because when that call for us comes, we won't be able to go change, we won't be able to go put on knee pads. We either have to grab our vest, grab our life-saving tools, and we'll have to respond to that critical incident. So our training department was trying to make that training as realistic as possible for us so we would be better prepared. On November 20th, I've done this presentation a few times. People ask the question all the time, were there any warning signs? Did you have any indication that this person was going to come to your campus? Were there any emails, crazy phone calls? Did you stop his car, as being suspicious on campus leading up to this event? And so the answer is no. We had no prior knowledge of this person coming on our campus. We had no warning signs. So this was a no-notice event. We do have a very robust employee threat assessment team, as well as a student threat assessment team, and we work around the clock dealing with different incidents and situations with students. But for this, we had no heads up. So I think connecting the dots are really important, because there were dots that could have been connected, just like we've seen, unfortunately, in many other cases that have already been mentioned just briefly here today. Some of the dots that weren't connected in many cases before were the Virginia Tech shooter. I know Nikki Giovanni very well, interviewed her multiple times. We talked about her interaction with the shooter there at Virginia Tech, and she said multiple times she tried to impress upon public safety and the administration how concerned she was about this person's behavior. So she had lots of dots. She had dots in writing, she had dots in behavior, and she had dots from her own experiences, but those dots weren't connected ultimately to maybe take action. The movie shooter theater, who you've heard mentioned earlier, the dots were connected on campus, but those dots weren't shared within the community. So on campus, he was trespassed. On campus, if anyone saw him, they would be pressing the red button and calling the police. But within the community, that same level of alertness and awareness wasn't completely shared. And we know what happened at the movie theater there. How many of you heard about the German Airlines pilot just a few years ago? 16 and 2. 16 and 2, Mike. 16 times he reported dealing with depression, fighting depression, having thoughts of suicide. 2 times they sent him off on extended leave, or the equivalent of our FMLA. So they gave him extended periods to recuperate from depression, but they still allowed him to fly an airplane. They still put him in charge of people's lives, and ultimately he took his life and multiple other lives because of depression and rejection from a girlfriend. 16 and 2. Some of you heard about the tragedies out in California with Christopher Dorner. The warning signs were there. Maybe some people were giving him a hard time about not passing fitness exams, and he just, lost it. He went off on the deep end and ultimately took the lives of some of his colleagues and others, but he talked about it. There were dots to be connected. And then recently, the Nicholas Cruz situation, the former student, the warning signs were there. Over 7 years, law enforcement responded to his home about 39 times, dealing with different situations. So we got to connect these dots. The same dots were there. I'm going to tell you what those dots were in our shooting. They're going to probably give you goosebumps, but there were dots and information that could have been connected that maybe could have prevented the situation from happening. So here's a shooter's profile for the person that came to our campus to try to harm our students and employees. He was a former student at Florida State University. He graduated with a 4.0 GPA. Graduated with honors in 2005. He left FSU and went to work as an attorney, making $160,000 a year. For unknown reasons, he only stayed at that job for a short time, and then he transitioned into a public defender's position, making $50,000 a year. And for what no known reason at the time, he showed up at his family's home in a small city called Weehawken, Florida, on November 6th of 2014. So he left and drove across the country, showed up at his family's home unannounced on November 6th, and stayed in his room literally 6 days before really talking to his family. He would go to the restroom, they would bring him food, and he would go back into his room, secluded, for 6 days. On November 12th, he finally came out of his room. He asked his family, hey, can we talk? Can I bring you into the living room and I'll tell you what's going on with me? I'll tell you why I left my jobs in Texas and drove all the way across the country with no notice. So he brought a computer in the living room and he pulled up a website to show his family where he was suffering from what he determined to be a targeted individual. He told his family on November 12th that the government had planted a microchip in his head and that he was receiving signals from the government to do terrible things to hurt people. He told his family that the only way to overcome this tragedy was to do something terrible, to bring more attention to it, and his family didn't question him about it. His family didn't report it to law enforcement. His family didn't seek to get him any help. They just sat on that information. They didn't connect those dots and tell anyone what he was suffering from. We later learned that he may have been suffering from ADHD. We know that he used a .380 caliber handgun on that day, but he told his family that he was a targeted individual. Anybody ever heard that phenomenon before? Targeted individual? Look it up, do some research, because if someone claims to be a targeted individual, you want to know who that person is and you want to be aware, and I'll show you some more lessons learned from that shortly. So this was the shooter's profile. He started off outside of Houston. He moved to El Paso to work. On November 6th, he came back to Weehawken, Florida, on the exact same day that we were doing active shooter training at Florida State University, and then he ultimately came to our campus and committed the shooting. 24 hours before the incident, he went on to YouTube and uploaded a very long and detailed video about why he was going to do what he ultimately tried to do, and that was take lives of people on campus. But he went to fulfill what he told his family he was going to do. He was going to try to create more attention about this phenomenon of being a targeted individual. I haven't watched the whole video, but on it, he continues to say he's been targeted. The government was out to get him, and so he had to do this in order to bring attention to his plight. So the calls for help were pretty important, and it's something that I use as a training tool within my community, and hopefully you'll use some of these same points to remind your community members how important it is to give good detail and to provide good information when they're calling for an emergency. So I'm going to let you listen to the very first call that came in to the FSU Police Department. You're going to hear a little bit of confusion, and then you're going to hear a young lady take the phone away and give more detail about what happened. But just listen to the call and listen to some important things that the dispatcher said and did when she heard this information.
No?
FSU Police Assigns reported. How can I help you?
I think I need a paramedic at Stroger Library.
Okay, what's going on?
I need information. I'm calling paramedics, okay? There's a black guy with a gun. Is that what you said, a black guy with a gun? We have a black guy with a gun at Stroger Library right now.
Oh, okay, hang on just a second.
Headquarters to any available units, C51 to Stroger in reference to a Bravo Mike reportedly seen with a signal 0 handgun.
Okay, where was he seen last? Now, was someone shot?
What's going on? I need to know what's going on with the CCD.
There was a black male. He had on a Scully, and he was firing gunshots outside of the library. He came into the lobby of the library. My coworker and I were under the desk, and he fired a shot and went back out the door.
So you don't know which way he went. You said he had on a Scully, just like a cap?
Yes.
Okay, do you know what color it was?
Somebody was shot. He was shot in the leg. I'm sorry. He just told us that he was shot in the leg.
Okay, and there was someone shot in the leg?
Yes. We need a paramedic right now.
Okay, hang on just a second.
All units be advised it's going to be a Bravo Mike was firing outside.
Yeah, please,
Stroger came in, fired a couple shots in the lobby. The only description they can give is he was wearing a Scully cap.
So that was the first call. The second call was really quick. This is where you'll hear Sergeant Roy Wiley's voice. He has a distinct dialect, so listen carefully. But he's giving very quick instructions back to the dispatcher, and let's hear what he says.
All units be advised it's going to be a Bravo Mike was firing outside of Stroger, came in, fired a couple shots in the lobby.
the only description they can give is he was wearing a Scully cap.
And the closest unit destroyer, make contact, make sure we don't have victims headquarters. As soon as we verify some shots fired, I need CPD canine route. Sanford.
So two important things happen. We got a call for service. Typically, we train our people to dial 911 in the event of an emergency, right? Nod your head. Yep, that's what we tell them. But in this case, they fell back on what they've been trained to do ever since they've been on campus, and that's to dial 644-1234. That's the emergency number to the campus police department, just like calling your public safety agency. I think it was divine intervention because it saved time. We answered the phone on the second ring. The dispatcher heard the call, heard the nature of the situation, and she did something really important when she heard that there was a gun involved. What did she say? What did that dispatcher say? What did she say? She was like, hold on 1 second, ma'am. I heard what you said, but she said, headquarters to any available unit, start toward the library right now in reference to a signal zero, a person with a gun, and that started that process of getting those officers there, wherever they were on campus. The second important component was Sergeant Wiley. And just hearing that one transmission, he said, I want the first available officers to start going to the scene. I need you to start contacting our local law enforcement partners to get officers here. I need a K-9 unit in case we need to start tracking that person, in case we need to start looking for him. So he's already formulating this plan in his mind of what we have to do. I later learned that people came from all parts of campus. There were officers, they said, Chief, we sorry, but we drove over some grass, we drove over bushes. They did everything they needed to do to get there as quickly as possible, and it was a no-notice event. The second thing that was, third thing that was really important as well is that the city of Tallahassee is a close partner to the FSU Police Department. Their officers scan our channel. We have interoperability to where they can scan our frequency and we can scan theirs. And so an officer was within 1 block of the library when he heard that call go out, Officer Wayne Statz. He makes 2 turns and he's arriving at the same time our officers are turning into campus to confront this shooter who's now standing in the library, and 2 people are shot out in front of the library as they're pulling up. So here's the quick third call because I'll show you the timeline. This happened very, very quickly. Here's a third transmission.
Headquarters 445, I've got EMS en route.
Headquarters, shots fired. Headquarters, shots fired.
Shots fired, what's your 20?
Headquarters, shots fired. Suspect gun.
What's your 20, 304?
Right in front of the destroyer.
10-4.
So the timeline for that event is documented by FDLE, and our own internal affairs investigation showed that the call came in at 12:25 a.m. The dispatcher, as I said, immediately said dispatched officers to that location, and the first officers arrived within 1 minute and 30 seconds of that call. Oman Nations, my recently graduated officer, was one of the first there. He observed Ronnie Ahmed, one of our most critically injured students, on the ground. And this is an officer that has never been a police officer before. He says, Chief, I got behind a tree, I knew I had good cover, and I saw the person waving the gun, pointing, saying, you're gonna have to shoot me, you're gonna have to kill me. And he felt like he was going to continue to shoot people. So he came from behind the tree where he had great cover, and he got within 15, 20 feet of the shooter, and he said, I had to so I could get a good shot on him, and I didn't want to miss. And so those are the kind of people, those are the kind of heroes that we're looking for within our agency. The officers that arrived, all 5 of those officers observed the suspect standing in front of the library waving a gun, saying, you're gonna have to kill me, you're gonna have to take my life. He fired 1 shot in the area of Oman Nations, and then those officers, after giving verbal commands for him to put the gun down, they fired multiple shots, and the suspect was down at 12:27. So the call came in to our dispatch. We were able to process it quickly, get those officers on scene, and by within 2 minutes, we had that person down without hurting anyone else. We did send out our FSU alert 10 minutes later. Emails, text messages, all those things went out, and you can imagine that we were just inundated with thousands of calls into our dispatch center, thousands. And so we learned a lot from not having a social media monitoring tool. We learned a lot about interoperability and communications, and I'll tell you a few of those lessons. But I want you to see kind of what it looked like from our eyes. I told you we put this turnstile system in 6 years before the shooting happened. That means that the shooter had not been on our campus. He wasn't aware of this crime prevention enhancement. And so here's what it looks like that night when he came onto our campus. And that's a student swiping out just before the shooting happened. And then you're going to see the shooter enter the screen, not knowing that he needed to check in to get an ID. He thought he could walk right in. He looks at the turnstile and says, what the Fukushima? And you see another student swipe to go in, But he didn't want to stop at the desk. He didn't want to check in. I think he just wanted to walk in, go find a nice, quiet place, get his guns and ammo together, and then start attacking, innocent people who were unsuspecting that he was there. So here's the desk that he walked right past. He literally came in that frame, walked to the left. He bypassed those two clerks when he walked in. And so when he walked out, he walked the same way. So this is the actual video footage of that night of him walking. So the shooter's already outside. That's Christopher Dreyfus. He's the first person that shot at point blank range in his backpack when he walks outside. Watch the two clerks. As he walks outside, he's shot, point blank range. So they hear the shots, they see it, and for whatever reason, they don't think they can run, so now they think they can hide under the desk. But the shooter has already been in the library. He knows where they are. He knows their location. So after shooting Mr. Dreyfus, he walks right back into the library. He knows that the clerks are hiding. He points the gun at the first clerk, shoots him in the leg, and he points the gun at the second clerk, and it jams. His gun has a malfunction. So he walks to the top of the frame to clear his malfunction. Our student worker employee who shot in the leg is able to get up and run and says he's getting out of there. His colleague that was with him and says, you know what, running is good. I support that. And so she runs, but they cause this distraction, and another coworker, unsuspecting, walks into the frame. Look where he is, look where he's standing. He's not using his spider senses, he's not paying attention, but at some point it kicks in to him who that person might be that was shooting. He sees him, and he takes off running. We call this, I guess this is a blessing, because this student who just entered the library was spared. He has a working gun. His gun is functioning properly. He just walked right by that student, spared them, and went right outside to where now, within 10 seconds, officers are starting to arrive and confront him in front of the building. That student is standing directly behind him. I'm so glad he moved, because he would have been right in the backdrop of where we were going to shoot him in a few minutes. He walks off, he calls the police. Two students walk right in front of what's going on. The shooter raises his gun and shoots at our officers, and we start shooting back right now. So they're reacting to the shots that are fired. And where do they go? They walk literally right outside in front of where he's shot in front of the building. So 2 officers are with the shooter, Sergeant Wiley on the left and OJ on the right. They're going in to look for the person who's been shot. They're trying to see if anyone else is injured. There's some blue lights flashing on the screen on the right. That's the rest of the cavalry from the City of Tallahassee Police Department arriving. And now we're trying to get connection to the PA system within the library to make an announcement that everyone needs to shelter in place and they don't need to leave out. So look how quickly the City of Tallahassee officers were there in force to help us clear this building, make sure there were no other shooters, and make sure that we had this place kind of secured. It happened really, really quickly. So now we had to evacuate 600 people in the library. Having access to other facilities nearby is important, especially on a school campus, school grounds. And so my team made the decision quickly to use a nearby building, but before they allowed anyone in that building, they thoroughly searched every person that was going to go in that building. Before using that facility, they went in and sanitized that whole building. They made sure that there was not a human being available in that facility first, and then anyone they allowed in that building didn't have any weapons or dangerous items on them. And so they allowed those students to go into the building, and then within the building, we used every classroom and every auditorium just like this to house more than 600 students to tell them what happened, ask were there any needs for emergency counseling, and then to get those witnesses who may have seen anything before the incident happened. And there were 11 people that we had to pull from those rooms and immediately transport to the police department for interviews. So the press conferences were huge. To add to some of the complexity of that day, it was President Thrasher's 10th day on the job as being a president of the university. First time president, and then thrown into a national event. The press conferences were successful because before we went out, we met as a group. The provost, the president, the board of trustees chair, my supervisor, the vice president for finance, our attorneys, communication directors, my deputy chief at the police at the time, the city manager, Chief DeLeo was the chief, and there was a little confusion because the mayor-elect, Mayor Andrew Gillum, was about to be sworn in, and the former mayor, was about to be removed from, not moved, but it was just termed out. So there was this nice argument in the hallway before the meeting on who was going to come in the meeting, but the Mayor Gillum, we did settle on him coming in. And then I had Florida Department of Law Enforcement representatives there and ATF. So with their help, I was able to go before those press conferences and speak accurately about what was going to happen. You know, and you can't do that without preparation and making sure you have all the right information, regardless of what it is before the event. We got an outpouring of support, lots of support, just like when these tragedies happen. Students, community members, family members came and chalked. They wrote lovely notes. They brought a lot of donuts to us. Don't want to see donuts. But these are the posters that are still up within our police department right now. The notes from family members telling us about the bravery and the heroism and how proud they are to have us on campus and serve in the role of law enforcement. So those are the reminders that I try to stress to my staff, not some of the messages that the media tries to send us today. So those are what they see every day. Lots of posters. I had to read all those posters probably weeks later. And I had to move one of the posters because I didn't want people to get the wrong image, because students have quirky senses of humor. But one little poster said, "We poke fun at the police a lot, but last night, you guys killed it." I thought it was hilarious, right? But I was like, let's move that poster down the hall so no one sees that. I do want you to know miracles do happen. I told you that Jason Dreyfus was shot at point blank range when he walked out of the library. He was the first person that was shot. But he was in the library that night doing a research project on religious studies, and it required him to check out multiple books on religion. And it was those books on religion that stopped the bullet from penetrating his backpack. And so that bullet was lodged in his religious studies books, and he survived without any injuries that night. We learned a lot. One of the biggest lessons we learned was interoperability. I call it the gift and the curse. It's the gift that we want. We all want to be able to connect and talk, but if you don't think through certain situations and scenarios, then you can have challenges. One of our biggest challenges that night was that we had a City of Tallahassee police officer there, as I mentioned. And because we had our officers there and the City of Tallahassee police there, the dispatchers at the CDA, that new agency, decided on their own to create a radio bridge. So they created a bridge without going through any approval, and they came across our radio system after creating that bridge and said, "This is the CDA Radio Dispatch Center. FSU Police, stop dispatching immediately. You no longer have radio authority." So how did that go over with my dispatchers who are working the scene with my staff? They're back and forth on the radio. "No, we have authority. It's on our campus. No, we have a city officer there." And so literally the radio traffic was confusing, and it took up unnecessary time and space on that radio. So unless you have a memorandum or interagency agreement about what agency will have operational control, who will take over that radio, think it through, talk about those hazards that may come up in terms of interoperability. We have benefited from great communication over the years, and so recently we've invested in improving our interoperability with MutualLink. Not a commercial, but just telling you the truth. To be able to turn radios into communication devices, being able to communicate with our Panama City campus, our Sarasota campus, our international sites, in different sites around the world. We can communicate with them instantly. So our administration has made that investment for us, and they felt that it was very important. Also important was within our community. Our new sheriff, Walt McNeil, is standing up a real-time crime center. And after a recent presentation, he immediately said, we have to do this as a community to improve interoperability and immediate video capabilities of crimes and things happening within our city. And so we're all on board with that. Something else that we learned was really important was dealing with the media. Hopefully you won't have to, but if you do, make sure that that person has some training and that they continue to coordinate each press conference, finding an appropriate location. This is just David. I've been in this for a long time, going on 28 years. I don't like outdoor press conferences. I hope that you will consider making sure that your press conferences are in secure locations so there's not a secondary attack or someone's not going to use our press conference against us in the future. So find a secure location, find a site that you can control, make sure you check credentials, make sure that that place where you're going to have this important briefing with the lieutenant governor and sheriffs and other leaders is safe and secure where no one else can use that as a part of their platform. Stay calm and continue to feed that beast. Very important. Another lesson learned as I get ready to close is social media monitoring. We did not have a social media monitoring tool at the time of our incident. I wish we had one because we could have cut down on our costs tremendously about the misinformation that was being shared on social media. Many posts were saying that there were multiple shooters. Many people were saying the shooter was still out on our campus, and we didn't have a way to really harness that information and respond promptly. So we went out and we found a social media monitoring tool to help us to deal with that situation. Being a targeted individual is a phenomenon that I mentioned. It's not something new. Miriam Carey, Aaron Alexis, and the shooter on our campus all claim to be targeted individuals. Do a little research and look up Miriam Carey. The White House Secret Service Police had to stop her from ramming a car into the White House. Aaron Alexis was the Naval Shipyard shooter not many years ago. Myron May, the shooter on FSU's campus. All these people, including the airport gunman down here in South Florida, claim to be targeted individuals. So you want to know if someone is making that claim. We worked with FDLE to identify another suspect that we would have never known about, who was on social media claiming to support the shooter who came on our campus. And so a law enforcement bulletin went out a couple of years ago trying to share that information about targeted individuals and what they believe. The power of social media, we would have never been able to catch that information or identify this additional person without using a threat monitoring service, and we use Social Sentinel, and it's been outstanding for us. It doesn't overwhelm us. We use it within our K-12 system as well as in the university. And then a lesson in leadership with you all before I close. Sometimes in leadership, you have to follow your gut. You have to follow your gut. You heard the first two speakers talk about the tragedies at Virginia Tech on April 16th, 2007. Well, I had only been at Florida State for 1 year, and I had coordinated the first ever ACC Chiefs of Police Summit to take place on the campus of Florida State University, bringing all the chiefs of police together from the ACC to talk about safety, sport management, threat assessment, behavior, and had all these great speakers there with the FBI, FDLE. And on April 16th, that was the date that I selected to host that conference. Had selected it for months. About 2 days before the conference, I got 2 phone calls. One phone call was from my chief at Boston College. He says, "David, I got the flu and I can't come. I won't be able to attend." And I said, "Good, you got the flu. Stay home. Don't come." And then the second call I got was from Chief Wendell Flincham at Virginia Tech. This is a Wednesday. The conference is going to start Thursday and Friday. Wendell called me and says, "David, I'm not going to be able to come. I just feel like I need to stay at home. I've gotten some false fire alarms. We're coming up on exams, and I just feel like I need to stay on my campus and miss the conference." I said, "But Wendell, we're going to have barbecue. We're going to have potato salad. We're going to have a great time and great training." But Wendell said, "I got to follow my gut, David. I got to stay home." And he stayed home. And so as our conference started to begin on April 16, 2007, all of our attention turned to the monitors because Wendell was involved in one of the most horrific active shooter events on his campus, and he decided to follow his instincts. So if that's not a reminder for you as leaders, public safety officials, law enforcement trainers, chiefs of police, you got to follow your gut when something is telling you that there's a problem or you need more resources or whatever. I can't even explain how Wendell chose to miss the only ACC Chiefs of Police Summit ever to stay on his campus, but that was fate, and that's what he decided to do. And so I can't explain that, but I hope you will keep that as a lesson learned. Many of the media were there. People from all over the country descended on our conference to ask, how did he know that something was going to happen? And I just said he couldn't have known, but as a law enforcement professional, as a leader, he followed his gut. I put that in there. I'm not an Alabama supporter, but Nick Saban followed his gut. Who takes out the starting quarterback in the national championship game? But he turned out to be right as well. So following your instincts as a leader, knowing your profession, knowing your craft is important. No other person outside of your field can tell you how to do your job, and so I hope you have that confidence. And as a leader, you have to continue to fight. And I don't mean like Pacquiao, Mayweather fight, but you have to fight for resources, you have to fight for those training opportunities, you have to cut through that red tape so your men and women have the resources that they need to be successful and be safe. Whether it's a vehicle or training, you have to do it. Men and women in this room, chiefs, you have to get to those resources. I'm a huge supporter of Valor, the Valor Initiative. I'm a leader and trainer for Valor, and that's free law enforcement training to remind our men and women about pre-indicators for attack or flight, concealment weapons methods, how to look for people who are concealing weapons, health and wellness, and mental health training and safety. So I hope that you will take a look at Valor, maybe download the Valor app, and expose your men and women to free, outstanding law enforcement training that hopefully will save their lives. We learned about the after-action review. We did a post-incident report. We looked at all our police operations and the response, And so you have to learn from lessons that have occurred. And so we looked internally at our operations, and we put together a very detailed report that showed us how we can improve, and we put those recommendations to play very early. I also want to close by saying, even if everything goes as planned, you still could be, under a microscope. And so that's Ronnie Ahmed. He was shot 3 times. He's been paralyzed from the waist down. He's gone to the Capitol and talked about how thankful he was for the police response. He's talked to media outlets about my officers applying bandages and quick clot tools to save his life. But ultimately, even if everything goes as planned, you still can be held responsible. And so we are literally being sued by Ronnie right now for him saying that there was inadequate law enforcement services on campus. So just imagine if we didn't get there in 1 minute and 30 seconds. Just imagine if we didn't stop this shooter within 2 minutes, or if we didn't save his life. So even if everything goes as planned, you still could be, reviewed and maybe even say that you didn't do a great job. There was a great tribute put together, and this is how I'm going to close my presentation, but this is a summary of how it looked from the eyes of our campus community.
Headquarters, shots fired. Headquarters, shots fired. Shots fired. Shots fired.
All units be advised, it's going to be a Bravo Mike. He was firing outside of Stroger, came in.
436 Bravo, 440 headquarters, I'm in route 445 right now.
Get it in route, get command staff on the phone.
10-4. TPD's in route.
45 headquarters, I'm 1012.
Are you serious? Oh my God, are you okay? Headquarters 440, are you 10-4? 10-4, we do have a gunshot victim.
I need a medic for a person down.
45 headquarters, EMS 97.
You in your room?
Yeah.
Okay, just stay put. We'll notify everybody when it's okay to come out. We do have an incident going on, okay?
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. Police lines recorded.
Yes, hi. I'm just trying. My daughter called me. It was in the library.
Yes, ma'am. We do. We have an incident going on scene. The police are on scene and handling it. Okay. We will notify. Headquarters, any unit on scene at Stroger.
39, go ahead.
And just to confirm, you have cleared the building, or are we still working on this?
Headquarters, shots fired. Headquarters, shots fired. Shots fired. Shots fired. Headquarters, suspect is secured. I need EMS around 1018. I need EMS around 1018.
10-4, one subject in custody. EMS is 51.
I hope they're watching this crowd out here, this group of students, this group of people who care about this Seminole nation.
For all those affected by this unimaginable heartbreak, and for our beloved university. At this time, I would like to thank, on behalf of the student body, the brave men and women of our FSU PD and the Tallahassee Police Department for the quick and effective response to students in need.
We're stronger, passionate, and care about each other. God bless you, and thank you for being here tonight.
So without strong partnerships, it doesn't happen. Without the help of the Tallahassee Police Department, FDLE, EMS, Fire, all those partners that you need to know by first name, we would not have been as successful. And so I'm very thankful for their support. I'm thankful for Mutual Link having this event, bringing us together as a good reminder and looking at other resources that may help us respond to the next tragedy that may impact our communities. So thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Chief. And I just talked to Dave. He said he'll be around on the break, so people want to ask questions. We're already 20 minutes behind schedule. Jeff, that's what happens when you get the bargain basement MC. You should have paid for somebody a little better. Our next panel is some great experts, as I've told you. First, Mike Favorite. Mike spent 26 years with the Orlando Police Department. Came through pretty much all assignments, including serving as the Drug Unit Commander, the Metropolitan Bureau Investigation Commander, West Patrol Division Commander, and the Special Operations Division Commander. He's won a number of awards. Is very proud of his service, 17 years on their Special Weapons and Tactics team. For the past 4 years, he has served as the Managing Director of Valencia College for Safety and Security, and has emerged as a leading expert in campus safety. Our second panelist, Chief Paul Gauntlet of the St. Cloud Police Department, another Orlando alum. Chief Gauntlet is the Chief of Police and Public Safety Director for the City of St. Cloud, and he's been there since 2010. He served as a United States Marine and began his career in law enforcement with the Orlando Police Department in January of 1981. 28 years, he also served in positions of expanding authority. Both Chief Gauntlet and Chief Favorite are also Southern Police Institute grads, a great program. Upon retiring from Orlando, Pete became a consultant and advisor to the state of Florida Regional Domestic Security Task Force, was instrumental in the protection of critical infrastructure and public safety planning before going on to the city of St. Cloud. And finally, our host today, and we appreciate your great hospitality, Director Maxine Oliver. Director Oliver has served in public safety for a number of years, beginning as a public safety dispatcher in Sarasota, working for the Sarasota County Sheriff's Office, going to from there to the University of Central Florida as a police officer for 23 years, started when she was 12, and then coming here to Seminole State. We've got some great panelists. We're going to let them each do a presentation and then have some time for questions and answers. And I think we'll just start with Maxine and work our way down.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Seminole State College. As we talk about interoperability, for us, very important when you are higher education, because we are so open and we don't have fences, we don't have borders. We work with primarily adults, although we have some dual enrolled students. We also have an adult high school on our campus. We have multiple campuses. So the challenges are there in terms of being able to communicate with our first responders. So when we had the opportunity and we were invited to join in with Seminole County's countywide radio system, 800 megahertz radio system, we saw that as a great opportunity for us, for the security team, for our facilities folks, so that we have the mechanism already in place for our daily communications. And also when there is an emergency on campus, it's not something that they have to switch over to or remember how it works, because it's a tool that they use every day in their communications. In 2014, we partnered with Mutual Link to have the opportunity to provide live footage for those agencies that would respond to any of our campuses for emergencies. So that's very important. We have a great relationship, and for those of you, if you don't have a relationship with your county's Office of Emergency Management, that has been critical and very important for us in terms of knowing who they are, they know who we are. We have great relationships, great partnerships. We contract with the Sheriff's Office also to provide law enforcement presence on our campuses. And we also have a new partnership with the Altamont Springs Police Department, where we provide office space to some of their officers, and in turn we get that presence as well. So very important to have those relationships before something happens. And you can have all the tools, all the training, but if you don't regularly exercise what you learn and what you have to see how it would really work. So here at Seminole State College, for the past 10 years, we have had annual emergency preparedness exercises that we move around to various campus sites. And in those exercises, typically the Office of Emergency Management works with us on a chosen scenario. And we may have upwards to 100, 200 different law enforcement and fire personnel responding to assist and really help us evaluate how Seminole State College is going to respond in any given emergency. So all of those things in terms of interoperability gives us the opportunity to see how everything works here, what we can provide to our students, to our employees, and to learn from others and to grow from each of those exercises.
I'll go ahead and, I'm Mike Favorite. I currently work at Valencia. I'm going to talk to you about the mistakes that I've seen for 30 years in the business. Most of the time it was based on communication breakdowns on every after-action event that you went on. And I was always trying to seek for this information. Hey, can we put real-time video out to the snipers? Can we put real-time radio communications out to people? When I was exposed to MutualLink, I said, this is the answer to everything I'm looking for, that real-time information out there. If I didn't believe in the system, I wouldn't be here. I believe in it because currently I have 5 different law enforcement jurisdictions that I fall within with Valencia College campuses, and I can directly relate real-time information instantaneously with whoever has that system. We're putting the information out to the watch commanders responding, the officers if they have that capability, tying into the command staff structures. Nationally, we always want to test it. We always want to go through things. So we started full-scale exercises. First time that Valencia started that. We started one 3 years ago. We had one about a year and a half ago. And now we're doing a third in about a year down at the Osceola campus. So I just wanted to relay the user information as far as the person, the boots on the ground, and the command structure, making those decisions to direct our employees into that confrontation or saving students with that real-time information that we can put alerts out, whether it be through social media, the actual alerts itself. Very important structure for the boots on the ground as well as the command staff. So I'll be open to answer any questions at the end, but I just wanted to give you the real-time information as I see from a law enforcement officer, from a mid-level supervisor, and now somebody in charge of the school system for safety and security.
Thank you, Mike. My name is Pete Gauntlet. I'm currently the Chief of Police and the Director of Public Safety for the City of St. Cloud. St. Cloud is about 51,000 residents in a very aggressively growing community, and the challenges there in my 8.5 years as police chief is to really look at this. And we were asked to join the panel. One of the questions was, what's the scope of what we want to talk about? And my response was a very broad-based approach: preparation, training, communication, response technology, and of course, target hardening. We have been involved with MutualLink for some time, and to start the process, we wanted to take our existing 911 center, which, David, I want to say thank you for an outstanding presentation from FSU, and to take a piece of FSU's lore there. Our comm center is truly the tip of the spear. They are really the first responders, because the information that lands in the comm center, how it's presented, and the process in which it's distributed makes all the difference, and it made, I think, a key up there at FSU in their response to that. We wanted to get our hands around about 200 cameras that were in the city limits, and it was everything from water treatment plants to the schools to anything we could get our hands on. And we knew that the systems were all different. They were manufacturer differences. They were analog. They were digital. They were new. They were old. How do we get our hands around that? And MutualLink was certainly the solution to be able to do that. In looking at our schools and partnering with our schools, we're very typical of most communities in that we have one high school, one middle school, 4 elementary schools, and 3 charter schools. And to be able to network with our public school system and look at the target hardening issue, but more importantly, the communication and response. One of our great challenges today is the inability of some of our radio systems to work in a lot of public buildings. The information that we've received, a lot of it's tilt wall construction. The digital radios are a challenge, and oftentimes SROs have to step out of the schools in order to actively communicate. One of the things that we wanted to do is to work on that mutual link connection to be able to communicate, along with our fire partners. And we took a different approach and started to strategize how do we better integrate our fire service response in with police service. Because around the country, you see that lack of communication many times. The fire service is staged, the EMS personnel are staged, and they're not readily available until moments later. And that oftentimes is a frustration. So we integrated our system and created a public safety initiative in which strategically the fire department, police department are shoulder to shoulder. And I think it works exceptionally well in our ability to respond and not only to network, but to communicate and have our paramedics and EMS personnel right there behind us, not staged blocks away, which oftentimes loses valuable time and time again. And with that, I'm not going to belabor it much longer, but that broad scope, I think, makes a huge difference to try to get our hands around each and every one of these areas, particularly now with the communication aspect, because since 9/11, we're still failing to be interoperable. And I think that's one of the challenges that we have. That's one of the advantages we have. Fortunately, after many discussions and closed-door sessions, our public school system now is going on board 100% with Mutual Link, coming up with the panic buttons, being able to direct that, and we're going to be implementing the same program at our City Hall as well.
Great.
I have one more thing to add. We currently have 4 systems, 4 devices at 4 of our major campuses, and the service is tremendous. I always test things to failure, and the only time it failed is when I lost power and my emergency backup didn't work correctly, and that's when I lost the system. So it's reliable, and anytime I have a service or training issue, they're always answering the phone. They're always there for us. So I can't speak enough about that with all the staff on my department.
I only smile because when I first deployed Mutual Link, the city and county of San Francisco, who are always kind of parochial, said this thing is not worth it. It'll never work. We were in the middle of a big event, and they called me in the middle of the night and said, it doesn't work. Get it out of our center. It's taking up space. Well, when I got there, it turned out it didn't work because somebody tripped over the cord and unplugged it. And once we plugged it back in, everything was good. So I liked your story. I wanted to open up for questions, but I wanted to maybe pose a question from the podium first. To our 2 Orlando alumni, you were both special operations commanders, had SWAT team experience, not from just a school safety perspective, but from what you have done in your previous careers in special operations and response to those kind of incidents and coordinating with other agencies of patrol and fire. How valuable would you see something like this in that environment?
You go back to your roots. You go back to what is instinctive, and like David said, you go to your gut. You've had experiences for many, many years on those kind of call-outs and response, and you really understand the big picture. Besides technology, intelligence is the key. Knowing the ability to be able to see, having pre-laid plans. In our case, we have a very active drone program, believe it or not, in St. Cloud. We videotape, fly. We fly indoors, we fly outdoors. We have the ability to know what's there before we get there. The other thing that we did to help our first responders, but primarily given the technology, all of our personnel, all of our sworn personnel have smartphones. They all have the ability to download, and that's working through the system to be able to, if we, God forbid, if we had an active shooter, when that teacher hits that panic button, not only is he going to notify all of those other teachers and administrators and the PD, the cops in the field will see it. The cops in the field will be able to see the video. So they'll actually be able to see it before they even get there, so they'll have a working understanding of what's going on.
As a younger man, when I worked for Pete, I always wanted that information out in the field, especially You can put out flyers, you can put out suspect information, but what more realistic than putting a picture of the actual person you're working for? On our last full-scale exercise, Orange County Sheriff's Office, their SWAT team, was assisting us on that. Pete was gracious enough to send his drones down. We were real-time live feeding a hostage taker in a car because the drone went to the window, and we were able to put that information out to the command structure and all the snipers in the area, as well as the takedown team in the immediate area. So when I was begging for it when I was a younger man, it's here now, and we're making sure that we put that information out.
And Director Oliver, I mean, you've kind of seen this from both sides, both as a public safety dispatcher, as a police officer, now as a chief executive. With that kind of broadened perspective of being on both ends of the radio, both ends of the phone, how does that, how do you think that this all plays into all of that? And I think it's important because Chief Perry talked so much about the importance of his dispatchers.
Absolutely, and being able to get, because that's where the calls are going to come in. You know, when something happens, and here on this site, if they call from a campus phone, call 911. You know, they only need to make one call. They don't need to call 911 and then call the security team. We will know that a 911 call has been placed. I will get a pop-up on my cell phone that a 911 call has been placed, so that information is readily available through the type of programming and setup that we have, and then relaying that information. Our deputies here are on, because we're on the same radio system, we don't have to call them separately because they can monitor those calls, that information that the dispatchers put out, and they will automatically respond to that call, as well as our security team members. So dispatchers, yes, critical to have. They are the purveyors of that information. They are getting the calls from many different callers, trying to keep those callers calm, get the information that those units out in the field need in order to get the type of response that we need. And again, having the deputies here on our campus, having the partnerships and relationships before something happens is critical, because we know that all of those agencies, not just the Sheriff's Department, is going to respond to our campuses, because again, like Valencia, we have multiple campuses. So having those relationships already in hand and knowing who to call, who's going to respond, and more importantly, testing those things on a regular basis. Like Mutual Link, we test every day to ensure that it's working, because there's nothing worse than having something fail at a critical moment. So we test the Mutual Link, we test the radios, we test our emergency notification platforms consistently and regularly, so that we can be as sure as we can that when needed, it's going to work for us.
Great points. Questions from the audience? Yes, sir.
I can maybe answer this question simply because we've joined partnerships closer than ever with our fire department counterparts. In our case, it works that way because the fire chief now reports under me. So I have a captive audience a little bit there. But great operational, but the purpose was to be strategic. We're finding ourselves doing more and more tactical first aid training with our law enforcement staff than ever before, and giving them the emergency first aid tools, kits, tourniquets, various things like that in order to be able to provide. Because even on the best of circumstances, it's going to be a while getting your fire service personnel, your EMS, your paramedics on scene. And in our case, it's it's no typical than any other organization, but having the cops at least with the initial tools to be able to stabilize someone long enough until the paramedics get there go a long way. And I think that's one of the shortcomings, is not integrating the fire service tactical side enough in order to be able to do that. And we're finding out more and more, despite the staging presence that oftentimes fire services take, they want to get in the middle of it. They want to be there. They want the tools. At least in our case, we're buying them tactical gear. We're buying them vests. We're buying them. They want to be there. It's a matter of getting them in the game and getting our guys trained with them and jointly training together, and it's working out exceptionally well.
We also offer up our facilities so they can come out there and ruin our grass and drive over it, working with the fire department. So they actually do the scenarios on our campus, which realistically helps me out because they actually know my campus and they're working with the firemen and fire ladies and getting everything real-time information to my campus specific.
And we also had our full-scale exercise last year was focused on that very topic, where we had the fire officials stage with law enforcement for that exercise. I think I saw Captain Pagola out there. And they trained for it, they practiced for it. So as law enforcement went in to clear the hot zone, you had the fire and rescue personnel stage so that they could go in once that zone was deemed a warm zone to start extracting those injured persons. So in Seminole County, I know that law enforcement and fire officials, EMS, trained together for that purpose. Again, a lesson learned from the tragedy of Pulse in trying to get to those victims as soon as possible.
Thank you. Other questions? Obviously, everybody knows it's break time and there's free food. When my dad came on the California Highway Patrol in 1949, and when I came on the cops in 74, he said my first piece of advice is don't turn down any free food. So let's take 15 minutes. We'll try to hold you to that. We've got an aggressive schedule. We're going to get you out on time. We've got some great speakers coming up. Thanks to our panel, too, if you join me in thanking our panel. I can guarantee you that you're going to see a live demo today. It's exciting stuff. I heard from some of you out there that you're looking forward to that. Our next speaker is Captain Rick Francis, the Director of School Safety and Security with the Seminole County Sheriff's Office. He's a 10-year veteran with the Sheriff's Office. He oversees the School Safety Division. He served the United States Navy as a combat medic for 10 years. And then as a flight medic with the Army Reserve for 2 years. That's always happy for big guys like me, Captain, just in case we go down. I always like to know we've got some trained professionals around. He was then with Florida Fish and Wildlife before joining the Sheriff's Office. He has headed up the School Safety Division. He's been a member of the SWAT team, the Honor Guard, and the High Risk Incident Command. He serves as an adjunct professor at Seminole State. He's had really an outstanding career. And it's my honor to bring to the podium Captain Rick Francis.
Thank you. Sorry I missed earlier today. We were right in the middle of high school graduations for Seminole County, so I had to attend to that duty this morning and come over here. Like you mentioned, my name is Rick Francis. I have the distinct pleasure of being responsible for school safety and security in Seminole County. Any given day, it's about 67,000 students, 8,000 employees. Obviously, this is a job that we take exceptionally very serious. We have a wonderful team. We have a wonderful partnership with some of our municipalities that are in the room here. I appreciate you guys coming. But what we're here for is obviously a relationship that Seminole County has had for about 6 years with MutualLink. I got my lovely assistant here, Jeff, to help me out here. But we're going to talk about what it's done for Seminole County. And, obviously, nothing's done in collaboration. Seminole County and myself, we assumed that role as a sheriff's office 2.5 years ago. And, we went into it with a clean canvas. And, I've gone to a lot of districts, and we've had a lot of come up to see us about our best practice and how we're doing things. And we don't have all the answers, but there are a few things that I've learned by being here for the last 2.5 years. And literally, it's a 24/7 job for us. And one of the things is that the collaboration, And we've had a relationship with MutualLink for 6 years. We bought some of their products through a grant. And when my first week as the school safety security director, I wanted to bring technology into our schools here in Seminole County because we lacked it drastically. And one of the first things I wanted to do, and it's not to minimize the role of the principals, but in Seminole County, before my involvement, the only person that could lock a school down was the principal. And 2.5 years ago, we put a dedicated officer or deputy that's fully trained for school safety and security into the schools. So the gun-toting individual in the school had to go through a principal in order to lock the school down, which is, we all agree that's not the right best practices. So I started to systematically make some changes to ensure that our men and women who are sworn in our schools were the subject matter expert when it came to school safety and security. With that was the desire to have a soft panic button where I can put that ability for that administrator, any adult Seminole County Public School employee to declare an emergency in our schools. And again, not to minimize the role of the principal, but I felt it was very important for us. We all know, we've all read the studies, how fast these things occur. And most of them, obviously, as everybody knows, law enforcement is usually not what resolves these active killer situations. So the soft panic button, we had some parameters that we insisted upon in order for our finished product to have. Of course, being in the Florida, we have sunshine laws, so we had to go through competitive purchasing. But we wanted to ensure that panic button had some fail-safes and some safeguards to ensure false alarms were not activated. So we ended up settling on was the Rave soft panic button, but the first requirement, it had to have that relationship with MutualLink. It had to be able to have that multimedia aspect of it where we're able to grab that camera feed, and we'll explain some other features on it as we show this demonstration. Secondary, it had to have the ability to eliminate false alarms. That the Rave soft panic button has a built-in system that has a couple different features. First of all, you have to hold the button down for 1.5 seconds. If you break that, you have to obviously re-engage it. Secondly, it has a 5-second screen lock, which is quick. So if someone has it open in their purse or their back pocket or something like that, it'll go into a screen lock. Another option is once you hit the big red button or any other button, it's going to ask you, are you sure you want to call 911? And it doesn't matter if it's Android or iPhone, it takes that secondary touch. Yes, of course I want to call 911. Now, as soon as that happens, if the phone is in the geofence that we set up in the school, so every school building has a geofence, the whole entire campus, including any stadiums, parking lots, whatever, you customize that geofence. Of course, you can, we usually try to go out, 75, 100 yards outside of our most extreme perimeter and set up that geofence. So if that app and that phone is activated off the campus, a lot of these features are not going to happen. For example, we have it set up in Seminole County. When you activate that, there's multiple layers of people that are notified. And the idea is, since we have a dedicated officer or deputy in every single one of our schools, is obviously they need to be notified there's a problem. As soon as that activation occurs, which we'll demonstrate here shortly, is that all the employees on that campus are receiving a text message and an email that this activation, so Rick Francis declared an emergency, this is emergency declared, here's where I'm at, and of course a date and time stamps it. We have it set up in Seminole County, a few additional layers that are giving that ultimate notification on the worst case active shooter situation. All of my office is obviously included in there, the executive staff at the school board, sheriff's office, any local municipalities that are on patrol during the day shifts, our emergency management, and all my fire chiefs. So hundreds upon hundreds of people are notified instantaneously. And even on our best day in law enforcement, it takes us about 60, 90 seconds to dispatch a priority call, to receive it to a call taker and dispatch it. I've just saved 90 seconds, if not better, on those notifications. So obviously, this is something that we implemented in Seminole County. We tried to get the county, the whole county, to jump on board when we went through this, and we lost a lot of traction, and we just obviously ended up with the schools. I have 61 schools. Next year I'll have 62, and we also cover multiple administrative sites. A couple different hurdles we ran into. One is we don't, as the Seminole County Public Schools, They don't pay for phones. There's a phone stipend for some executives, but so you're dealing with people with personal phones. You always get, the Big Brother and all the other good stuff. So that's one of the hurdles. And then every single one of our schools, with the exception the one we're opening up next year, was not meant for school safety security. Obviously, cell phone coverage is a shortcoming that we run into in schools, so we have to train our employees to jump on the certified Wi-Fi, which is a secure Wi-Fi site for the employees to jump on. So when they set their phone up, as soon as they go into the campus, it'll automatically pick up that Wi-Fi. And of course, when we started deploying, we deployed it softly at all our administrative buildings since they were in a 12-month rotation, and then we moved out to our schools. We initially set up a 50% across the district minimum, and then of course we bumped that up to 75. We did see a spike after Parkland, and let's face it, you can lead people to water. Sometimes you can't make them drink. I've gone on record numerous times. I don't think fencing, cameras, access control, that is such a small portion of the big scheme of being responsible for school safety and security. Where I think that mental health, the bullying aspect is a large part of that we need to improve upon. But technology, and I'm sure a lot of people sit in this room that is responsible for schools. I'm sure every day you get bombarded by somebody selling this or someone trying to demo this product and stuff like that. And I don't foresee that slowing down in the near future. But this product is something that obviously I'm up talking about. We're very proud of this relationship. We've used it successfully in Seminole County. We've had a couple, I'll give you one example. The media was asked about this earlier. A teacher was out and about, thought she saw a male run out of one of our middle school front offices with a shotgun. Obviously, teacher, very descriptive, shotgun. She initiates the lockdown procedures, and we go through what we go through. All notifications, patrol response, our response, etc. It ended up, obviously, once we got a hold, because of this technology, we capture that camera feed immediately. It's an automated system where it creates an event, which we'll show you. And then, of course, then we can start immediately looking at the video from off-site and determine if what we have. And of course, we all know, my brothers and sisters here in law enforcement, it's very unusual for us to have a real-world incident and have only one phone call. So when you're not getting multiple calls or multiple activations, it's a good indication that you might want to look a little bit differently and maybe slow the people down a little bit. And in this case, it ended up being a purse that a male was walking out with to the car on behalf of his wife's request. So we've done a lot of medical saves on it, using it. And part of the Rave app that we use every day is that staff assist. That's just a function. It's tin-canned responses that are that you can modify or customize. SRO need to hear, principal need to hear. It goes directly to that nice person, like the medical, for example, function. The only people that are getting that text are only medically trained in your schools, your SROs, SRDs, etc. So I'm going to activate, and hopefully this works. The first time we've done it remotely, so hopefully it works. I got the expert here. So I'm going to send my lieutenant a message to activate an emergency, and we'll show you how fast it operates and all the features once we activate it.
So while the captain's doing that, if you look at the screen, the gray area with the MutualLink logo is the work area. It will handle 8 incidents of any kind, EMS, command, so forth and so on. You're going to see an incident automatically populate here once the panic button is pressed. The agency list that you see on the left is a live list. I can invite them into an incident now and speak across their radio systems or to see their video systems on request. At the bottom left, you see resources that entities and agencies are willing to share into an incident. In almost every case, it's a radio system, it's a video system, and a telephone system. So the platform was designed for ease of use, the lowest common denominator. While we're waiting for the panic button, if you think about the Broward, which I've investigated and actually toured some of their schools, there was a single 911 call that went to one agency. Using this technology in the panic button, we can notify as many agencies that you want simultaneously, such as here in Seminole County, the school board's notified, the sheriff is notified, and even a local PD, which may be your SRO or responding force that's closest. So if you think about it of a spear mentality, and as the captain was relaying to you, in many cases, the alert can beat a 911 call at its conclusion. So the captain is on the way to his vehicle off the panic button, and then he races to the scene, and probably en route, he's getting the 911 call, outlining or deploying exactly what's going on.
You ready?
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to send a text message to get this process started.
And please understand, this is real world, so if anything happens in real life in any schools, we will discontinue this effort. So what you'll see is you'll see an incident populate right in the middle of the screen, and then radio and video will be integrated for communication purposes to us.
The nice thing about what I use this application for is if we had a real-world tragic event. I know the Chief's talked about his event at FSU. I can share that. I can capture, let's say an incident occurred in one of my hallways and there is loss of life or serious injury. I can immediately share that with surgeons at our child hospitals that are going, because they're going south for us in Orlando. So that's the activation here. It's just like an Amber Alert. There's also an email that just came through. And here's so it's instantaneous.
So I have a choice to accept or reject. Obviously, I'm going to accept.
This is Tiffany at the ESC. We're just doing a test of the brake panic system.
And from Seminole State College, good morning.
Good morning.
So I have this same setup in 3 different locations. I have it at my office.
This is the sheriff's office, copy.
That's the comm center also getting it. So I have this set up at my office, and now we're capturing video. I have it set up in our comm center, our telecommunication, and also have a backup in emergency management office. So obviously, go ahead.
I was going to say, that was a text message that came across the platform telling me that there's actually an emergency alert. If you look at the top of the incident, it says panic, and it's a description. So if it was a certain teacher or a certain classroom, please understand this is a simulation, that would say panic and the teacher's name or the room number. So once resources are integrated, and I bring my radio in, and from Seminole State College, could you go to a single feed for us, please? That this now has the ability to be shared out. The captain can take it from his computer and give it to Captain Pergola or SWAT team leader on any computer device. Smartphone, tablet, iPad, you name it. You could be anywhere in the world. If you have internet access, you could be part of the solution.
This is the sheriff's office confirming still a test.
So we've immediately, it goes to the 3 points I told you about. So in this incident now,
It is still a test, thank you.
the panic button was pressed. There are 3 agencies in here. We could be the Florida Highway Patrol sitting here, and the sheriff and the school board. So the school board knows they have a problem. In Broward, the school board didn't know they had a problem. In many counties in Florida, when I do a school survey, the school board knows nothing is going on. They're the last to know. Well, how about if you have multiple schools on the same footprint? You might want to go into a lockdown procedure. Using the panic button app, you can actually push the app from administration telling that school to initiate your lockdown procedure. And again, I have the ability on any computer to speak across the platform, and if you would, change video feeds for me. The TX button goes across all walkie-talkies that are brought into the incident. The yellow intercom button is strictly internal. Agency to agency, doesn't go across these devices. So you can kind of collaborate. How do we want to respond? We can also share any file across the system, from a student photo ID to a map. So if you had a map of a school layout, you could tell a SWAT team from Seminole to come in this way. You could tell Orange County SWAT team to come in from another way. You could draw on it and share it across the platform. Now here in Seminole County, you see the resource on there is telephone. They actually have a phone system that's integrated here. So any phone can be merged with this walkie-talkie. I mean, you all understand this, so I don't need to demonstrate it. So the SWAT team leader, through Captain Pergola, has initiated a throw phone. Now, we've done a number of exercises where you have, in one case at the Edgewater High School, there was a hostage situation on a bus. So they threw a phone in. Using that phone, everyone that's on the MutualLink platform can listen to the phone conversation on the red TX button, speak to each other internally on the yellow intercom button, and then respond appropriately when ordered to the negotiator. It worked flawlessly. Text messaging is part of the platform. If you don't feel you can speak, you can text message. So I don't want to waste a lot of your time. Everyone here understands about text messaging. So I'll see if they want to share a floor plan.
While he's pulling that up, so the email I got, active shooter reported at blank by this person, a date stamp, initiated code, red, lockdown, which is our procedures for an active shooter.
So let me get out in front of this. So any file off of any system can be shared. So if you think about, that can be shared out to any computer device. In Orlando Police, the command staff has it in their cars. So you heard Captain Favorite, and I don't think, he didn't tell you the story, but they actually had a jumper on the library. And the off-duty officer that was doing the detail at the Valencia West was brought in on MutualLink. The floor plan was shared with him and the video feed from the roof, and it never even reached the level of a full response. Using the technology, they got the guy off the roof, and he's here, he'll attest to it. So there's the floor plan that can be shared out to the world on any device for a better response. I mean, I think you all get it. I don't want to beleaguer it because I know time is. Any questions on any part of it? Come on now, you gotta have a question.
So this was one of the first items that we brought forward as far as technology is a soft panic button through Rave with that partnership with MutualLink. As you can see from this incident, there is no lag, and I'm of the opinion that if we had a real-world incident at school, I'm not bothering the school for any video or anything else. I can do this all remotely from my tablet, from the incident command. Myself, Bergol, are high-risk incident commanders for Seminole County. This is what tools that we need to get the job done. And again, I fully expect the school to be busy or on a lockdown situation. I don't have to negotiate with them. I can get everything I need from as far as the response planning and making sure we got the right resources coming to the school to handle the problem.
And I'm going to finish with this. The state of New York required us to do a matrix test as this is deployed statewide. They gave us 10 schools in the northern part of the state, 10 schools in the southern part. They said, okay, wise guys, prove it out. They gave us SWAT team. They sent the SWAT team in to apprehend the bad guy. It took about 10 minutes, a little below the national average. They said, okay, we're going to give you MutualLink now. It took less than 5 minutes, or 50% of the time. Now, why? The video showed suspect or suspects in the description to the dispatcher. Number two, they're carrying a pistol or a long gun. Your approach is different. And third, which direction do they head in? That was the nexus of time. And fourth, and I'm going to finish with this last line, can you breach the lobby without being shot? The dispatcher says the lobby's clear. The SWAT team or officers responding, they breached the lobby and they can move forward from there, getting hold of maybe the cameras, the intercom, which we can integrate too as well. Imagine being able to make announcements from a cell phone or a walkie-talkie across a public address system. We can do that as well. We can integrate into access control. You give me the triggering switch, sorry for the play on words, but we can automate, MutualLink can automate the incident alert and invite in the participants that you tell us you want to be in. And with that, Mr. Brooks, I'm done.
We had a question, I believe, sir. Two.
What's the training time for the end?
Well, the panic button training is a simple video on YouTube. I mean, who can't push a button on a phone? As far as the MutualLink platform, it was designed for ease of use. You can get any level from online training to in-person training, and it's continual. It's kind of what I do. MutualLink's been part of the papal visit, part of the Super Bowls, part of marathons, and I think you can all imagine merging as many as 50 agencies together.
I can answer that from a we deployed in June of last year. We got our SRDs, SROs, subject matter experts. We spent a good amount of time making sure they understood the product. We subsequently, when we started rolling out, we had a couple schools that were lacking. I call them my weekly shame list. So if they were below 50%, I'd go in there and do another talk with them. And here's how I sell it. It's very simple. Most of my audience is teachers. I was like, listen, if I could give you an app free of charge that could raise your overall test scores for any, standardized testing, whatever, by 20%, and not have the DOE come investigate you, is there anybody here who would not sign up for that? And of course, the answer is no. This is that button for them. So a lot of times it's taking care of those shortcomings as far as, hey, here's the process for getting on our Wi-Fi. Here's, and let's face it, there's some people who don't have smart technology. We still have some people that are getting close to retirement in our schools. They don't have smart technology. So we have to have those redundancies, systems, all calls, et cetera. But we found ourselves having to go back out and resell it at a couple of different schools and just stay on them a little bit. But we're right now, the district's just about below, just right at 75% right now. And it's just that constant effort. Again, unfortunately, tragic events seem to spark a little bit more interest. Parkland, unfortunately, was a little bit closer to home than Santa Fe, but whatever it takes. Thank you.
Any other questions? Jeff pointed this out already, and I talked about it a little bit in my earlier talk, but just remember, if your agency and your school is connected, and the sheriff's office and other schools connected, you all are connected. There's a lot of agencies in Central Florida already, including Orange County Sheriff's and Orlando PD, that are connected. I use this for Super Bowl 50 in the Bay Area. It's kind of a complex environment, a lot of agencies. We had 3 big anchor agencies, Oakland PD, San Francisco PD, and San Jose PD, but the stadium was actually in the smallest city in the NFL, Santa Clara. We were able to share with police, fire, EMS, FBI, Secret Service. Everybody was on the system. We did the same in Super Bowl 48 in New Jersey. It's a simple, you saw Jeff do that, simple ask and accept. So, you ask somebody, hey, you want to join my incident? And if they accept, they're in. And if you follow ICS, you don't even have any problems with how you coordinate radio traffic, because the ICS commander controls the event. Here, our next speaker is going to speak on the legal impacts of the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas School Public Safety Act. It's Leonard Dietzen, who is a lawyer here, who has specialized in school district and law enforcement law, represents a number of school districts throughout Florida, and also the Florida Police Chiefs Association. Many of you, I'm sure, have worked with Leonard on other law enforcement related issues. So, Leonard.
This certainly is a difficult time to speak on this topic following Texas. I can say, from my personal background, I've been representing law enforcement 30 years. I also represent the School Board Association. I have about 15 school boards as clients, and I'm also the Suwannee County School Board Attorney. More importantly, I have a son at Valencia, so I'm very glad to hear the chief has a mutual link here. I have a daughter at UNF. She was subject to a threat on campus there. That was a scary situation as a parent. And my wife is a teacher in Leon County. And at her school, she has 1,100 students, 7 buildings, and 1 SRO. So you can imagine the challenges that are faced without technology. Where's the remote? Is this it? I'm looking for the remote. Okay, here we go. All right, so let's go to the first slide. Next one. All right, so Florida gave us a huge law, as we know. The Senate Bill 7026 is 105 pages, covers a vast variety of areas of law dealing with risk protection orders, Baker Act, all kinds of areas of why law enforcement, schools, mental health officials, Department of Education, DCF, everybody now has to collaborate on how to solve this problem. Today, I'm just going to focus on the narrow sections of the Act that deal with school safety officers. There's a great a great expense to districts that you have to know about that they are now faced with. And this section of the law was amended to basically say that all school boards have to partner with law enforcement agency and establish or assign one or more school safety officers at each school facility. And how many in here have SROs? And are they in each school in the county? And I can tell you, we have right here, Seminole, very few. I could say there's probably 5 to 10% who have already got this coverage. There are some districts that are millions and millions of dollars short. And the law is in effect when? Typically, laws go in effect July 1. This is March 9th. This went right into effect. So the standard of care is right now, like the chief told you he was sued after 1.5 minutes. Standard of care is fast. Frankly, there's too many lawyers, and I'll be the first to tell you that. It's amazing. So what are school safety officers? They are school resource officers, school safety officers, and school guardians. The school resource officers are, next slide, they're just full sworn officers. The only unique thing that this law does, it says they must undergo a psychological evaluation. Most sworn officers have this, smaller agencies don't. So you can't plug in your officer in a school as a school resource officer for detail work if they haven't had a psychological. They also have to complete mental health crisis intervention training with a national organization. Some don't have this, and so this needs to be done as soon as possible. Now, the school safety officers, these are folks that the district can have. They can have their own police department, or they can hire out in their own police agency. They're fully sworn. They have all the requirements, just like an SRO. Most people, if they have a small police department, they're not doing all their own SRO duties. They're using a combination of sheriffs and a combination of police chiefs. Now, the big problem with the SROs right now in this is the funding. There was $97 million funded, and it sounds like a huge number, but when you divide it by the thousands of schools that need officers, and most believe an officer, if the salary is $42,500, that's what it costs. But everyone in here knows that's closer to $100,000. And then what do you have to buy? A car, little things like insurance, and all the stuff that go along with it. So it's a lot higher price tag. And so now negotiations are going on between school boards, chiefs, and school boards and sheriffs of how do we afford between the entities to split the tab. And back in the day, when I say back in the day, prior to November 14th, there were contracts between school boards, and a lot of it was 50-50. But now there's a lot of money. There's a belief that the money is all going to the schools, and so they're flush with cash. And so some agencies are saying, well, we would like 100% of our funding. And I'm here to tell you, because I do represent schools too, they're not getting the full ride. And that's why I think some of the answers are going to have to be in technology, because they're not getting the full ride for SROs. The third category, which is coming to life in the next bullet, is the Guardian program. So for school guardians, the next slide. Now, at first, this is an idea that came from other states. It's basically a volunteer from the school board who is not a strict classroom teacher. They can't be a classroom teacher. They volunteer, they're concealed, they have a concealed weapon, and the sheriff, we'll go to the next slide, the sheriff has to agree to this program. And some folks in my county, in Suwannee County, they agreed. I'm from Tallahassee, but I represent Suwannee County. They agreed to adopt this program along with having an SRO in each class, each school, because they're going to supplement theirs. But here's folks who are allowed to be inside of the definition of certified, inside the definition of who can be a guardian. If you could skip directly to the requirements of a school guardian program. And it's essentially you have to have a valid license for a carry concealed weapon. The training is 132 hours of firearms training, and it breaks it down through the statutes of what type of firearms training. You also have to pass a psychological evaluation, initial random drug tests, ongoing weapons training, and you have to have 12 hours of diversity. Many school boards are looking at this program this summer. And the sheriff, again, has to agree, so it doesn't matter what the police chief thinks. It has to be the sheriff has to agree to implement this program. There's about, I think, $67 million of non-recurring money that goes to the sheriff to train these folks and get them up to par. Again, these were supposed to be school board employee volunteers, and they get a whopping $500 stipend in the statute. I don't know how many are going to do all of these functions for a $500 stipend. I can tell you I deal with a lot of unions. The unions are already saying, we want to bargain that amount of money. We want to bargain the training amount of money. We want to bargain additional life insurance. We want to bargain just about everything to do with this new job description. Now I'll tell you, I just spoke to an education conference last week and the police chiefs conference. There's something being evolved right now called the Guardian Plus program. It's where school boards are not going to use their own employees like the custodian or the parapro or the media specialist. They're hiring retired officers or anybody who wants to be a guardian at X dollars an hour, and just say $20 an hour. They're bringing them in, and then they're sending them to the sheriff's office to get these 132 hours of firearms training. And then they're getting the diversity training, and they're sending them out to a school, and that's it. That's the sole training they have. And that's just the Band-Aid solution, because they can't afford what? A full SRO. They can't afford, like the chief said, you got to hire the best of the best. This Guardian Plus program is going to be a little bit unusual, to say the least. There's some districts doing 25, 50 of these, and then they're putting them out into the schools with guns and with, they're not through the academy, and they don't have the real-life training that everybody in the room has had for decades. I view this as going to be a challenge, but again, it's just as if a law was passed to say we need 2 teachers in every classroom. The teachers are not in the colleges right now like they used to be, and right now they don't understand our chiefs and our sheriffs are having a hard time with regular attrition. So if we can't replace our current staff, now we need, say, 3,000 more SROs in Florida. You have to do the math, and all of a sudden this new Guardian program is popping up. So, where do we go from here? I think this program has to make sense. There's additional funding in the Act. It's for school hardening. Most people believe that has to be beyond brick and mortar, because no matter what you do, there's problems, just like there was in Texas. Our law in Texas would not have stopped anything this past week. And it's pretty, for Florida, if you would have told me a year ago we would have got gun control, we would have got all kinds of stuff like this, I would have said that wouldn't happen. Someone told me, it was their phrase, this was a mini 9/11 for Florida. This woke up education, law enforcement, and mental health. And so now everybody's talking to each other. I think always the solution in everything is technology. And I can tell you, I've been in many schools all over the place. I freely walk around. Occasionally I sign in. Occasionally there's someone at the front desk that asks me to sign in. And again, I sign in and they don't know. I just sign in Leonard Dietz Rumberger and they're like, okay, go see HR. And I walk by and nobody verifies anything. I think things are going to change rapidly this summer once you get past graduation. But again, the law's in effect today. And so the conversations need to be had with chiefs and sheriffs and superintendents to try to solve this puzzle. And this law, again, is much more comprehensive than just school safety. There's just a lot of different areas of the law that affects for law enforcement. But I can tell you the Guardian program is going to be the one you're going to have to watch and pay attention to, I think, in your communities. The cost of an SRO, the actual cost of the SRO, I think good faith negotiations have to be going on between sheriffs and chiefs. And this summer is going to be, I think, a very difficult time because schools are doing their budgets, cities are doing their budgets, and counties are doing their budgets, and most people are what? Out of money. I mean, most counties and schools and that, their fund balance are being reduced. And so it's going to be a challenge of how to do everything. I think the large amount of money is, I think there's over 100 million, and Mike will tell you later, for school hardening. To me, that makes sense to have this technology. I mean, if my clients ask me, just seeing it, I've been around Jeff for a few years at the police chiefs conferences. The timing right now is it couldn't be better to solve a problem. And the problem is people in a crisis communicating. I've seen it all the time. You always see the after action studies, and it's a breakdown in communication. But for this law, there will not be this type of money next year. Make no mistake, this was $500,000, half $500 million spent in 3 weeks. And that's, you always hear there's no, and I've only been in Tallahassee for 31 years. You always hear there's no money. I mean, that's the number one thing you hear, there's no money. And they truly came up fast with this type of money. And so if your community needs it, the timing is now to place it in the right areas and have the conversations with the superintendents, have the conversations with law enforcement. Because what I understand, this certainly is not affordable, and I can tell you what is not affordable is a lawsuit. I litigate all over Florida. Every lawsuit is critically expensive, even when you win. It's just painfully expensive. Are there any questions? Yes, sir. The question is, do I think there's a chance where you could go out to private sector to go out and get, are you talking about the guardians? Well, that's what schools are doing now. There are some superintendents who think you can go rent a cop like at the mall, but that's not allowed. It's very strict. They have to be the sworn officers have to be sworn. The safety officers, SROs have to be sworn. The school officers have to be sworn. And then there's this third category, and that's it. There's not a fourth category. So what they're doing is they may hire a private sector person, train them under the sheriff's, and get it, and the sheriff gives them a certificate and basically says, you cut it. But again, they're not allowed to do any law enforcement activity in that school board. They can only act in a crisis actor shooting type situation. So they're not allowed to make arrests. They're not allowed to do anything. And, there's going to be insurance issues. How do you insure someone who, 6 months ago may have been at Wendy's and now has a gun and is on campus? I mean, that's going to be a real insurance issue. I know, I talked to a few carriers, they're not happy about it, but this is the law. But whether or not they'll let like Wackenhut or someone come in, that didn't work, and it's not allowed currently. Mm-hmm. Oh, there's hundreds of schools out there. Yes. Well, right now, actually, the law's in effect now, so the duty with the superintendent, it's more stressful than that. It's today. And then how many kids go to summer school? So summer school's got to be covered, and I mentioned that to school board attorneys that are going, oh, crap. Because there's remedial classes, there's all kinds of stuff. Usually SROs rotate out on the road during summertime, but now if you have summer school, they're going to have to reconfigure how to put them in different buildings and smaller buildings. But there was a belief only high schools needed SROs, and maybe you could put one in a middle school and teach DARE, but not all of them. They would bounce around to 10 middle schools per SRO. But this says for every school facility, including elementary. And so, there's also a model where in some districts they're going to use sheriffs or chiefs, law enforcement officers for detail work for 4 hours in the morning, another one for 4 hours in the afternoon. But some of my chiefs are saying our folks are maxed out. They've got too much overtime, they need a break, and some will take the money and run. So there's different, depending on the size of your agency. But the law does need to change. There was hope there was going to be a special session on gaming, and so we could fix some of this. Never happened. Yes. The question is, does the law fall under charter schools? They are a public school. The $1.98 question, actually it's a several $100 million question, is who pays? Does the charter school pay for the SRO or does the district? And that's a battle going on in each 67 districts. Because if Miami-Dade has to pay, that's 120 charter schools. So their balance is going to go down. That's 20, 30 million. And so charter schools are a big tackling problem. And you have a charter school with 30 kids, the entire school, specialized school, versus one with 1,100, and they both need an SRO. It doesn't make much sense, but again, what are laws? This is a little bit of the Lawyers Relief Act, because you need a lawyer to go through 105 pages of this and say, what does this section mean? And there's a lot of them that really don't make a lot of sense in this. Yes, sir. Well, the statute says the volunteer school board employee under the Guardian, they're going to get a $500 one-time stipend, which, as I know, most school boards are going to pay them for professional development training. Most union contracts say, all right, we'll pay you during the summer to train for X dollars, but under this Guardian Plus program, some people are just going to hire them for 25 grand, a flat hourly fee, or they're just having various ways of paying a person who applies to be the guardian, which frankly doesn't really jive with the statute, because the statute contemplates a current employee volunteering. And they want to do it, they want to go through this training, and they already do their daily job, and this is just an add-on, they're just armed. And one question is, well, are they going to be secret so no one knows because for public records reasons? And one of the problems is the sheriff has to train them and give them their certificate, and there's all kinds of records at the sheriff's office, so I don't think they've addressed that. I think it's going to be public. I've been asked that several times. So there's no funding for the guardian side except for the $500 stipend. That's not going to excite anybody to come work for an agency or want to do this. There are some people in a small town who will do this no matter what. And then the larger the city, the harder this problem becomes financially. And this is a real financial problem. Yeah, commitment and when to do this. And some sheriffs don't want to do it. And so if the sheriff says no and the school board says yes, sheriff wins. And then if sheriff says yes and the school board says no, there's no program. So now you need 100% SROs. One more thing about the funding. There's $97 million for SROs. There's $67 million for the Guardian program to train, and that money goes to the sheriffs. If the sheriffs collectively say 70% of them don't want to do that, that money goes back into the SRO pot, probably in August and September-ish. So that money will be available for SROs without a special session. There will be a budgeting. Mike can explain how that works in Tallahassee. It's a little bit of voodoo, but it's built into the law. And so there will be more money available, but not near one-to-one coverage in every school board. Good point. Sheriffs can't find the SROs now. Chiefs can't find the SROs now. Sheriffs can't find employees. I mean, they're not in the academies like they were 15 years ago. And they're retiring fast. So when you hear of every person in drop, they're not in equal amounts in the academies. So it's an issue. But just stay tuned and stay in contact, obviously, with your schools. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Mike Herodopoulos who owns his own consulting business now. Mike's a former member of the Florida State House and Senate. He served from 2000 to 2012. He was elected by his fellow senators as the president of the Senate from 2010 to 2012. During that time, he got hit with a $4 billion budget crisis. Through his leadership, his colleagues in the House and Senate, and Governor Scott, they were able to resolve that without raising taxes. That would never happen in California, Mike, so thanks for that. Mike's a former chairman of the Senate Criminal Justice Committee and has advocated for the wrongly accused. He is a college professor, former college professor, 20 years at University of Florida and Eastern Florida State, where he taught politics and history. He's the author of 3 books on politics, working on his 4th. He lives in Harbor Beach, Florida, with his wife, Dr. Stephanie Herodopoulos, and their 3 children. Mike?
Well, the good news is I might be a former politician, but I won't talk long. And I'll be very straightforward with y'all. As a parent, a person has a young daughter in elementary school and our son in high school and our oldest is in college. These are trying times. We are nervous going to school. A lot of us are. Of course, you all are on that front line. It is a difficult time, and people are looking for answers. And it is not a one-size-fits-all solution. We're looking for multiple solutions. And what the legislature did this year is clearly unprecedented. $500 million in a very, very short period of time pushed onto an issue which we're all grappling with every single day and are trying to figure out. Your point well taken. How are we going to afford these different folks? How are we going to train these different folks to try to protect our kids, let alone the technology and the communication solutions that MutualLink and others are putting forth. But I know as a parent, I want to know what's going on. As a legislator, I wanted to know what's going on, and so this is why this technology is important, not just for the obvious that Jeff and the others showed you today about law enforcement communicating with each other in these times of crisis. We all saw those harrowing pictures of the parents wondering what's happened to their children. And this type of technology can let those parents know exactly what's going on as opposed to hours and hours wondering what's going on. And I think that's vitally important as well. But let's also be very clear that this money that was put forth this year, and they've given approximately $97 million to the counties to handle these issues on the hardening basis. The other SRO question is still in flux as we speak. This is a one-time hit. Understand that whatever or however you all choose to use this money this year is going to be your one big shot at trying to solve this technology issue and some of these officer issues, because there are so many other pressing issues on the state. One of the issues that are coming down the pipeline right now is on the criminal justice system or the prison system, on the healthcare issue, if you haven't heard about that. Even transgender issues you're looking at that could cost hundreds of millions of dollars to our prison system today. So understand that as you make this decision, and sadly it's in a short time period, it's probably a 60 to 90 to 120 day window that you all are going to decide how to spend this money. You better be in communication, because once that money gets spent this year, they're not going to have it next year. Because if you haven't heard, like the regular school funding went up for about $1 a student last year. And there's already a call for a special session to increase the overall spending on schools in general, not just on the public safety angle. And so as you all, as leaders in your community, I can tell you as a former legislator, what meant a lot to me and hearing from law enforcement is not hearing from a person who was just kind of taking an interest in the issue. I would go to my police chiefs and my sheriffs, and I would say, what is your opinion? And that's what we attempted to do. That was the decision-making process. If you have not engaged your state or senator or state house member, do it now, because they want to hear from you. They did kind of everything they could politically, throwing this kind of money at the issue, $500 million, in what was already a tight budget year for other reasons. And we can only imagine how politically sensitive the gun control or Second Amendment issue was as well. The fact that the governor took on one of his biggest supporters, that being the NRA, was a pretty big deal. And so this is a one-time hit. And this is something where over the next 30, 60, 90 days, you need to be in communication and tell these folks what you want. I think this technology is incredibly powerful. It's something we did not have in prior years. And when I talk to my sheriffs and my police chiefs today, they don't have the ability to communicate like they want to. This is a tool that's affordable, and we know it works. Seminole County has proven that to be the case. So my high recommendation, given the position I've had in the past and I'm sure very active in politics, is actively engage, proactively talk to your state representative and state senator, because they do want to hear from you. Believe me, there's no one they want to be close to, especially in an election year, than having a picture with their police chiefs and police officers and sheriff's officers. Take that time, and they're going to listen to you, because they recognize that they want to, one, solve the problem, and two, they're in a crisis where they know there's only so many dollars to be spent, and they won't want to just throw money at a problem. They want to look at concrete solutions that they know can make a real impact on the incident. And also, again, I can't stress enough as a parent that parents know what's going on so they can relieve that stress, both physically and mentally, in this trying time for all of us. And so with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you all have, but if not, please take this time that you have in this window of opportunity when there is serious money available to make these potential law changes, that you get ready for session after the elections, but make sure these dollars that are in possession today are used wisely so we can maximize public safety, which we all desperately need. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Our final speaker of the day is George Hunter. George is on the command staff and a member of the Warren County, Ohio Sheriff's Office for 24 years. He's been very active in all of the divisions, to include serving in court security and training, in patrol, pretty much all of the agencies. He is on the Ohio Judicial Conference Court Security Review Committee and the Ohio Supreme Court Security Review Committee. He's a graduate of the Northwestern University Traffic Institute School of Police and Staff Command, the Ohio Law Enforcement Foundation's Police Executive Leadership College, and the FBI's National Academy 247th session. George is here as an ALICE trainer, an active shooter trainer. It's a great way to end today's conference, and it's my pleasure to introduce George Hutter.
How y'all doing? I'm going to end this up today. I'll try to be quick. I don't stand behind the microphone a lot. I like to move around. That's just the way I do it. We're going to talk about the ALICE program today. Anybody not heard about the ALICE program? I'm sorry? All right, is that better? We're going to talk about human action. We've talked about and we've heard about law enforcement response all day long, all morning long. 24 and a half years full-time law enforcement. We all like to believe we're going to be there in time, and all the greatest infrastructures and everything can increase our response time, but can it ever be quick enough when your loved one is in that 47 seconds, like in Chardon High School in Ohio? That active unit started and was over in 47 seconds. We're going to talk about human action. How when people get involved, they can increase their survivability. How training, I've heard this over and over time today, when everybody who has their different projects or processes, they all talk about training. Well, let's think about this. From 1992 to 2010, all across the United States, violent deaths in schools, a study done. There are 468 violent deaths, 348 shootings, 67 stabbings. How many kids during that time did we lose to fire? None. Why? Because we train them. We show them what to do. Same thing with tornadoes. We train them for natural disasters, but we don't want to train them for a man-made disaster. We're going to talk about infrastructure and communication. Our mission is simple, is to save lives. How, and I'm going to introduce a blended model, how our national trainers can help you get this to a large organization quickly. We talk about the bill that was just passed, and people were still reacting to that. Implementation of this program can take some time, but we've changed that because our mission is simple, save lives. If I come up here and I talk to you today about a mission that's going to take you 6 months to implement, what if something happens day 2? You need to be able to roll this out quickly, and I'm going to go through that today and introduce those of you who haven't seen the ALICE program to the program. Because over 15 years, what we've learned is implementation is hard. At the sheriff's office I worked at, I had a sheriff that was very proactive, and he let me spend a lot of time in this. But how many people change positions within an organization? They retire. Something like that. Your staff changes. And how do you know that the people are getting the same message over and over and over? Through our blended learning model, what we do is we have for healthcare, houses of worship, and for K through 12. People take an online version of our training, and then we come in either with certified instructors or with national trainers, and we complete the blended model. Your online training is reduced cost. It's scalable. It's trackable. It's easily done. You don't have to take somebody and put them in a 2-hour end service and put somebody in their position so that they can do that. They can take the information online, get the information right online, self-paced, and it's convenient. Once you've had all of your schools, your staff, how long would it take somebody to get in front of every student in a school that has 1,000 kids? A long time. Our mission is to save lives. You do this through the blended model. You get everybody to take the e-learning. After the e-learning, A certified Alice instructor goes in, gives personalized experiences, and as we've heard so many times today, run the drills. We don't just sit there and tell you what you're going to do. We're going to show you what we're going to do. We're going to talk about the program being scientifically based. How the brain can only do one thing at one time. People said they can multitask. They can do one thing at one time. Force science tells us that. And if your brain can only focus on one thing at one time, what happens when that OODA loop, that thought process, is interrupted? The human brain takes 1.29 seconds to reset. Someone comes into a classroom or into an auditorium wanting to do some people harm. And we know through years, classic lockdown doesn't work. I say classic lockdown. Lockdown, shut the door, get in a corner, hide, and hope for the best. We need to change that. We need to change the traditional lockdown. Think about tradition. Think about how times have evolved. What were our parents told to do during the Cold War if Russia attacked? Yeah, you're laughing. Get under a table. For a nuclear bomb, I'm going to crawl under this. We've seen time and time again how setting kids in a corner does not work. They're easy targets. They're stagnant targets. Virginia Tech, when the FBI studied that, we all know what it takes to shoot accurately, get on target. We're going to talk about that. When they went to the range and studied where this individual trained, you know how he trained to shoot? He bought targets and he lined them up all along the floor. And he practiced shooting like this. What was he expecting? Exactly what he got. People in lockdown. We're going to come in and we're going to give the personalized experience. And then we're going to run the drills. Doing our 2-day instructor course, half the day, we'll have the first half of the day will be lecture, things like that. And people, especially usually, I'm not picking on cops, I still bleed blue, they'll be looking at me like, there's no way this is going to work. Second part of the day, we put it to the test. We put you through the scenarios and show how we can increase your survivability. Out of most of the classes you do, if you have a class of 30 individuals in the first scenario during classic lockdown, at least 28 of them will be dead in less than a minute. Simulated dead. The last three scenarios we do, if you have 3 people hit, that's a lot. Because of the human action. Again, somebody comes through that door to do me harm. If lockdown is my only option to get in a corner and hide, he knows exactly what to expect. He comes through that door, and now I'm throwing something at his face. I'm doing something to increase my survivability until you all get there. That's not what he's expecting. We run the drills. We take you through it. How are these things ended? Through history. Our training institute is backed by history, force science, and a lot of case study. And we found that the two most common ways these things end is, number one, people get involved. Chardon High School lasted 47 seconds. Do you want to know why? Does anybody know why? Because Frank Hall, a football coach, armed with a lanyard, yelled at him, interrupted that thought process of his, and chased him out of the school. We talk about in our training about how during a dynamic event, the frontal part of your brain will shut down. And if you haven't stuck a Rolodex card in that midbrain, when that time happens, you're going to freeze. Fight, flight, or freeze. 3 basic responses to fear. You got to train the freeze out. Doing those drills in those scenarios, people walk away empowered, as the first slide said. They walk away empowered, how they can do it. The other way, as we've seen in the one video from the university, the people went into lockdown. They kind of hid, as the chief said, and then decided they're allowed to leave. They got out. History also tells us these guys are not marksmen. They're not expert shots. They're the lowest tactically trained you law enforcement professionals will go up against. That's why they like their targets easy. Get them out of there. And we're going to show them and teach them how to do both. People ask me, they say, oh man, can you really do that with little kids? Sure you can. Sure you can. The last thing I got to do at my son's school when he was in 2nd grade before I retired and we moved was we evacuated his entire elementary school in less than 50 seconds. Wasn't it scary? It didn't freak them out. They know what's going on. We're going to show you that you can do both, because this no longer works. Monterrey, Mexico. This is a recent video. We know from Columbine, from all these case studies, that classic lockdown don't work. But look what these kids do in Monterrey, Mexico. And why are they doing it? It's because the only thing they've ever been taught to do. That's it. You're going to see a gunman come in, he's going to shoot the teacher. Watch what the kids do. Remember what I said about easy targets. You all are on the way. What if you're not there in less than a minute and a half with him in this room with all these kids? Watch what the kids do, though, after he turns the gun on himself and shoots himself. He's going to come in from the left. He shoots the teacher. She's down. Where are the kids? Think of how easy targets those kids are right now. And he's allowed to freely walk around doing what he wants to do. Would anybody want your kid doing that? He shoots himself, and the kids all leave. Why did they have to wait so long? Because that's what we've always told them to do. Our training talks about taking numbers, especially in your high school and your college settings, taking your numbers to use numbers to control and how to control individual. Virginia Tech, of the classrooms that did nothing, either before or after the first or second attack, 28 people died. Of the classes that were proactive and did something, 2 people died. One was Professor Labrescu, who was holding the door shut to keep the killer out. It's inadequate training. The Fort Lauderdale airport shooting. I heard someone else bring that up today. 3 adults, as a gunman pulls the gun, starts shooting, and is walking away from them. Would you believe it if I said 3 adult people took shelter behind an empty luggage rack? That frontal lobe of their brain, when that stress-induced heart rate kicked in, it shut down, and they thought, what do we do? The only thing you know how to do. Get behind something. It's an empty luggage rack. Watch. Again, he's going to come in at the left. Luggage rack is right straight in the middle of the screen right now. Pulls the gun, starts shooting. Let's take cover behind an empty luggage rack. What good's that going to do? Absolutely nothing. What should they have done? Kept going. That's where Alice comes in. It's a proactive approach. It tells people that you don't have to wait any longer to be told you're allowed to increase your survivability. Just at the college, nobody had to tell those people they was allowed to leave. It gives you options beyond traditional lockdown. Going back to the same point I made earlier, people say, well, if you train everybody in my community or my school about this Alice stuff, aren't they going to know what your training is? Sure, yeah, they are. What don't they know? The human action. What's going to happen when they come through that door? They can't predict that. In any of these events that we could talk about, have any of them been exactly the same? Does anybody know of 2 school shootings been exactly the same? No. So how can we train exactly the same? It's not the same event. Alice is not sequential. You don't have to be told you have to lock down before you're allowed to evacuate. You don't have to evacuate before you're allowed to counter, take back control. And it's all research-based, again, with the mission to save lives. What is the Alice? Alice, alert. An alert can come in many different fashions. With this awesome system here, you can get that alert out quick, and when the message goes out, the people are now allowed to make that decision. What's important now? What do I need to do right now to increase my survivability? Do I run? Do I get out of a window? Is it time to barricade a door? What all do we need to do right now? Who's allowed to make it? I heard someone say it earlier, that they had to wait for the principal to give the armed officer the okay to issue an emergency alert. That's crazy. What if it's a teacher who sees a kid in the cafeteria with a gun? Does she got to make 3 phone calls? With this program, anybody's allowed to make that alert. And with everybody on board, the importance and the emphasis on the importance is there. How can you get it out? You see emergency tech notificator, this stuff here, awesome way to get it out. Or, like I said earlier, it could be a loud bang. They could smell the smell of gunpowder after a loud bang. And that sensory input, that lets them know I'm allowed to do what I have to do to increase my survivability. Locking down. Locking down on steroids. I only have a short period of time with you here today. I wish I had more, but locking down on steroids, you can see using your environmental items to barricade a door. I was teaching in Charlotte, North Carolina, one of the best barricades I've ever seen. I personally tried to get in this door, and they barricaded the door with a bicycle and a microphone stand. They figured it out. You let people practice it, the better they get. The better they get, the faster it happens. Barricading. Spreading out in the room. Spreading out in the room. So when the shooter comes in and the marksman in the room, he comes in to look for a crowd of kids in the corner, and now they're all spread out. Now, that 1.29 seconds, I'm going to pick a target. Oh, this guy's moving. And every time I'm doing that, that 1.29 seconds starts over. Am I going to be able to shoot accurately? No. Don't huddle in the room. Spread out with things in your hand to throw. Don't open the door for anybody. You guys will let them know when it's time to open the door. They don't open that door for anyone. First aid supplies, anything else you may need for the lockdown. Glass. Or people who have locks on their doors that they don't automatically use now because being secure is inconvenient, right? I've heard that I don't know how many times. Can't we be kind of secure? No. Glass can be defeated. Columbine, Sandy Hook, Hastings, Red Lake. Your information portion of Alice is just a continuation of the alert, and with this system here, wow, what a way to continue that alert. Continue that information going out. So people, again, can make that decision. The shooter's in the auditorium. Well, I'm over by the cafeteria, so I can get out this door over here. The shooter's here. Now he's there. I can make that decision. What's the best way not to be shot? Don't be there. Get out. That's the preferred response. Keep that information flowing. Counter. We all know what it takes to shoot accurately. Target acquisition, sight alignment, trigger control, grip, stance, breathing to shoot accurately. We use red foam balls. And those are our countermeasures that you're allowed to throw at a person when they come into a room. 99.9% of the time, I've only heard of one time ever that they can do all of those things while a bunch of people are throwing red foam balls at their heads. People flinch. It's a natural human response. Flinch. Somebody's throwing something at your face. Now let it be this microphone. Let it be a microphone stand, a stapler, a tape dispenser, a can of green beans. Who knows? I'm throwing at your face. There's no way. Yeah, you might be able to shoot, but you're not shooting accurately. 72.9% of the time, handguns are used in these events. And those people who shoot a lot in here know that how much that handgun need to be off, just a little bit, to throw that bullet way off. Now, think that you're going to do all that stuff, and I'm going to shoot that chair right there, and he's going to throw something at my head. I'm probably going to flinch, move that thumbnail. Force science tells us that it takes a half width of a thumbnail to throw that round off significantly. It can't happen. And through the scenarios, we show you how we're going to disorient this person and get in their OODA loop. The observe, orient, decide, and act, that takes 1.29 seconds for your brain to reset. And if I come into a crowded room like this and I'm going to decide to do something, and now I've got people running, people throwing stuff at me, people yelling, whatever, that's going to be hard to do, and I'm going to have to reset that OODA loop every time. People ask me or ask us, you mean you're telling little guys and gals that they should do all this to gunmen? No. What's the preferred method? Evacuate. What do kids do the best? Run and scream, right? That's why we're always telling them to sit down and shut up. You tell them to get out there, run, move, get away. All of them want to do something. We're going to offset that OODA loop. People must have the authority to leave. I'm going to listen to a little 911 tape here in a minute from Columbine. People have to have the authority to leave. They can't wait to be told. We teach in our program that you leave everything behind. Don't go get into vehicles and drive away. What's going to happen? A bunch of crashes in front of your venue now that first responders can't be there. And we're going to remove as many potential targets as we can. Get them out, get them away. Get them out, get them away. Get everybody to a rally point, because everybody wants to know where their kids are going to be. You mean to tell me, Georgia, you want me to take your 9-year-old son and stick him out of a window and tell him to run into the field? Yeah, I sure do. I had one educator ask me, he says, well, what am I going to tell you whenever you call me and say, where's my son? And I'm going to say, well, I have no idea where he's at. I stuck him out the window and told him to run in the woods. I said, well, yeah, if you want to infuriate most of your parent population, sure. But having a predetermined rally point, Mr. So-and-so, we've had an event in the school. Yes, we've had a mass evacuation. Your son has evacuated. We have crews in the area right now trying to locate them. What if I just told that parent? He's safe. He's not a casualty. And where to go to reunite with your son. All these things we go in much more depth with our program. I only have 30 minutes today. Think about this. Occupants must have the authority to leave. This is Patty Nelson from Columbine High School. For 4 minutes and 10 seconds, she sits in this library. And she waits for what? You'll hear Patty say, oh my gosh, that was close. Oh my, that was close. And the last thing you'll hear Patty say is he's in the library and he's shooting the kids. What were they waiting on? Patty did nothing wrong. Patty did the only thing she'd ever trained to do. She didn't have that Rolodex card in her midbrain. She'd done the only thing she'd ever trained to do. One student in the enhanced version of the 911 actually asked if they could leave, and that's when you hear Patty say, no, get under the tables, get on the floor. All along, there was an exit in the back of that library that would have led them to an exit out of the building, and they could have been gone. But for 4 minutes and 10 seconds, they laid there and waited on the shooter.
Jefferson County 911. Yes, I'm a teacher at Columbine High School. There is a student here with a gun. He was shot out a window. I believe one I've been Columbine High School. I don't know what's in my shoulder. If it was just the last beat or what. Okay, has anybody been injured, ma'am? Yes. Okay. Yes. And the school is in a panic, and I'm in the library. I've got students down under the table, kids. Heads under the table. Kids are screaming. Some of the teachers are, trying to take control. We need police here. Okay, we're getting them there. Who is the student, ma'am? I do not know who the student is. Okay. I saw a student outside. I was in hall duty. Okay. I was on hall duty. I saw a gun. I said, what's going on out there? And he said, oh, it's probably for video production. It's probably a joke. I said, well, I don't think that's a good idea. And I went walking outside. I think he was damn to see what was going on. He turned the gun straight at us and shot. And my God, the window went out. And the kid standing there with me, I think he got hit. Okay. Something in my shoulder. Okay. We've got help on the way, ma'am. Okay. Okay. Oh, God. Stay in the line with me. Oh, God. Hey, just stay down. Do we know where he's at? I'm sorry? Do we know where he's at? Okay. I'm in the library. He's upstairs. He's right outside of here. He's outside? He's outside of this hall. Outside of the hall or outside of the hall?
Little confusion.
There are alarms and things going off now. Smoke. My God, smoke is like coming in.
Patty goes on for 4 minutes and 10 seconds for respect of your time. If you want to listen to the entire thing, you can go to, you can check it out on YouTube. But for 4 minutes and 10 seconds, she lays there and waits. And like I said, the last thing she hears, the dispatcher hears, Patty survived. Last thing that Patty said was, he's in the library and he's shooting the kids. The only way we're going to achieve that is through training. The only way we're going to achieve it is through training. My daughter, I have a daughter who's in junior high. I have 5 children. Yes, my wife and I are crazy. I have a daughter in junior high. Just last 2 or 3 weeks ago after the Parkland shooting, something happened at her school. Something that should not have happened. I'm not going into the details. But I asked Morgan, as I was talking to the superintendent, I asked her, I said, Morgan, what did you do? She goes, Dad, I don't know what the rest of the kids were doing. She said, I grabbed a tape roll, she said, my desk, and I started going towards the window. She said, I was going to bust it and get out. We can all do that through the power of training. Watching a video just doesn't do it. We can provide the training easily, get it out to everybody, and then help you do the scenarios to where people can do what they need to do to increase their survivability, because our basic mission, again, is to save lives. Who supports Alice? You can look at the laundry list. You can look at the laundry list of people that support Alice, and many, many, many state and local regulators are making recommendations that say lockdown. If your school, if your businesses are still doing lockdown-only strategies, they're no longer enough. You heard this term standard of care used earlier. If you're still doing what they're saying is no good, you're not meeting the standard of care. We can help you achieve that. We can help you achieve it quick through the blended learning model. We used to do instructor-led training where an instructor would have to go and get in front of everybody, introduce them to the program, do this, do that. I did it in the school district that I worked in, and it took me almost 2 years to get every school with the new teachers with this. With the blended learning, it goes out quick. You do the scenarios, and then you do your continuing training, and you've increased survivability. Other resources that you can find, I have business cards. If any of you have questions of me afterwards, I'll stick around for a little bit. Other resources we have, if you want to check out more about the program, it's there. Again, tried to stay on time. Thank you all. Have a great day.
Okay. Any final questions, comments, ideas you want to share with the group? Okay, the final thing, I think it's clear today. We've had some incredible presenters. The time is now. I mean, it's our duty collectively as law enforcement, as part of our community, as school officials, as parents, to make a difference now. We could let the political and the public policy arguments play out, but to take action now to improve the way we communicate, the way we coordinate, the way we respond, to save lives, now is the time. On behalf of MutualLink, on behalf of our presenters, I want to thank you for taking the time to be with us. We really appreciate it. Jeff's going to be up here. He's happy to answer any questions. We'd love to come out and show this to you and your teams. We're happy to show it to you right now. So thanks again for being here. We really appreciate it.